Chapter 781, The Weary Ludo. Standing tall amidst the rolling volcanic ash and rocky cliffs, Edinburgh resembles an ancient sage, exuding a calming power that soothes the restless soul. No matter how fierce the storms and undercurrents from the outside world may be, once they enter this city, they transform into a gentle breeze and a comforting drizzle. As a renowned tourist destination in the Muggle world, Edinburgh welcomes visitors from all corners of the globe year-round. Arthur's Seat, offering a panoramic view of the city, is a must-see for Muggles traveling here. Under the mist and rain, from a high vantage point, one can see a continuous stream of Muggles climbing the mountain, forming an uninterrupted black line from the base to the summit. These Muggles, engrossed in the beauty of this ancient city, known as the City of Literature, remain blissfully unaware that just a few steps away, wizards are engaged in their own sporting event. To the east, beyond the Salisbury Cliffs, lies a verdant valley adjacent to the coastline. Here, 6 towering spherical rings pierce the sky. Unlike the gloomy weather outside, the sky above the temporary Quidditch pitch is a clear blue, typical of the transition between spring and summer, dotted with a few pristine white clouds. The warm sun hangs in the southwestern sky, casting a red-gold glow over thousands of wizards gathered in the valley. A sudden roar, reminiscent of a mountain avalanche or a tsunami, creates a powerful wind in the valley, reverberating off the mountain walls and even dispersing the clouds in the artificial sky. Without a doubt, Lecter has caught the snitch, ending the game. In the center of the high stands, Ludo Bagman, his wand pointed at his throat, announces with a flushed face, waving his free hand enthusiastically. It was a brilliant performance by both teams. The Scots, undeterred by their defeat in the Quidditch World Cup, have undoubtedly regained their form. Judging by this victory, I am confident they will create miracles at the next Quidditch World Cup. The Skull Club boys played with their own unique style against a world-class team. Did you notice, everyone? They used their excellent chasers to outscore the Scottish team by 30 points. I wouldn't be surprised if they make it to the top 4 of the Europa League this year. Thank you so much, Mr. Bagman. The cheers in the stadium have yet to subside, but the Scottish team members, having received their final sponsorship payments, have already left the field after briefly interacting with fans. Ludo Bagman, serving as the special guest and commentator, returns to the stands lounge to receive thanks from the exhibition match's organizer. The organizer, a slightly bald but shrewd-looking man, seizes the opportunity to shake hands with Ludo, discreetly slipping a heavy money bag into Ludo's sleeve. Ludo's smile broadens even further. No need to thank me at all, York. As you know, as the director of the Department of Magical Sports, my greatest wish is to see our country's Quidditch prowess shine on the international stage. York nods eagerly. With your efforts, I believe we can win the Quidditch World Cup sooner or later, Mr. Bagman. York looks at Ludo with hopeful eyes. If you could join us for the celebration dinner tonight. Oh, I'm afraid that won't be possible, York, Ludo replies, patting his increasingly noticeable belly with a regretful expression. You see, ever since old Barty finally saw the light and started working diligently, much of the Tri-Wizard Tournament's workload has fallen on me. I must return to the Ministry tonight to handle some matters, and there will be other responsibilities awaiting me tomorrow. We're waiting for you to give us encouragement. Atticus Blaine thought to himself, understanding that someone as important as Ludo Bagman was always busy. York, with a respectful nod, lifted the suitcase for Bagman. As they exited the VIP section of the stadium, York disappeared back into the shadows of the corridor. Ludo, who had been smiling all along, suddenly stopped. He glanced around to ensure no one was watching and eagerly pulled a money bag from his sleeve. The golden galleons inside reflected the dazzling light of the setting sun, invigorating Ludo more than the game commentary had. After securing the money bag in his suitcase, Ludo hummed a cheerful tune, adjusted the brim of his round black hat, and made his way to the area where wizards could disapparate or use port keys. The open platform, set halfway up the mountain, was sparsely populated. Most people were engrossed in the post-game flying skills show. However, something seemed amiss with the fireplaces embedded in the walls, as they were emitting large plumes of smoke. Emergency personnel were on hand to manage the situation. Ludo scanned the row of fireplaces, searching for one that was still functional, when snap, someone tapped him on the shoulder. Startled, Ludo turned to find a black leather glove floating in the air, gesturing towards him. After a moment of confusion, he realized the glove was pointing him in a specific direction. Shielding his eyes from the sun, Ludo squinted and saw a dark figure standing atop the mountain, waving at him. While he hesitated, the black glove circled in front of him, making an inviting gesture. "All right, let's see who it is," Ludo muttered, reaching out to grasp the glove. Instantly, the world spun around him in a blur of colors. "Your commentary is as passionate as ever, Ludo," said a young but composed voice, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Ludo's mouth fell open in surprise, his eyes widening as he recognized the speaker. "Aho!" he exclaimed, his stiff expression melting into joy. He bounded over to Atticus Blaine, as if propelled by springs, and clapped him heartily on the shoulder. "Atticus, old friend, what a surprise! What's happening at Hogwarts? Are you here for the game? Are you a fan of Scotland, or are you supporting the Skull Club?" Ludo's face was all smiles, though a pang of guilt gnawed at him. He wondered if Atticus had seen him counting the money. Officially, Ludo was there to support the Quidditch cause in China by commentating on the exhibition match. Unofficially, everyone knew that such participation often came with private thanks from the organizers. It was not something to be openly discussed, as it undermined the dignity of the Ministry of Magic for the head of the Department of Magical Sports to travel so far for a low-profile game just for some gold. "I believe work isn't everything in life. Sometimes a bit of entertainment is necessary for balance, Ludo," Atticus replied with a knowing smile. He was aware of the flicker in Ludo's eyes, but chose not to mention it. With a wave, he strolled down a narrow path carved by Muggle climbers along the ridge, his demeanor relaxed and unhurried. Ludo grew increasingly uneasy. He couldn't quite fathom why Atticus Blaine had summoned him. It certainly wasn't for a casual chat. Removing his hat, Ludo hurriedly followed Atticus. "How are things at the Ministry these days, Ludo?" Atticus inquired nonchalantly. "Oh," Ludo perked up as if eager to share. "While I'm not a fan of old Barty's outdated methods, I must admit the department lacks a sharp and capable leader. Connolly is more interested in attending cocktail parties, and that foolish woman, Dolores, spends her days scheming to place her people in various departments to amass power. I couldn't care less about all that, so I decided to lay low for a while." "You are the director of the Department of Magical Transportation, Ludo," Atticus chuckled, his tone light. "Barty is seriously ill and won't be able to manage things for some time. Haven't you considered using this opportunity to demonstrate your abilities and garner more support?" "Oh, I'm not cut out for that," Ludo replied hastily. "Besides, that silly woman Dolores is determined to succeed Connolly. I don't want to become her target." After his quick response, Ludo's mind raced, and he glanced suspiciously at Atticus's profile. "Why, Atticus, are you looking for a sit-in at the Ministry of Magic, too?" Atticus glanced at Ludo with a hint of exasperation. The senior officials at the Ministry were well aware of his close ties with Amelia, and it was almost certain he would succeed Dumbledore in the future. Only Ludo would ask such a question. Yet, realizing that Ludo's mind was as muddled as ever, Atticus felt somewhat reassured. "Just like you, Ludo," Atticus replied calmly. "I'm not cut out for that either." Ludo smacked his lips in disappointment. There was something about Atticus that he admired. Moreover, Atticus had a good rapport with those cunning goblins. If Atticus ever aspired to be the Minister of Magic, Ludo would certainly support him. However, the condition was that Atticus would help him settle the gambling debts he had accumulated with the goblins. By the way, as if reading Ludo's thoughts, Atticus suddenly halted in front of a slowly drifting thin cloud. He looked at Ludo intently, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "How much do you owe the goblins these days, Ludo?" End of this chapter. Chapter 782, Suspicion. "How much money do you owe the goblins this time, Ludo?" Atticus Blaine asked with a hint of teasing in his voice. "Oh, you're underestimating me, Atticus," Ludo exclaimed, shivering slightly at the question. He opened his mouth wide, ready to boast, but the moment his eyes met Atticus's knowing gaze, his bravado faltered. With a sheepish grin, he admitted, "Only 5,000 galleons." Only 5,000? Atticus replied with a cold smile. That's nearly your entire salary for 3 years, Ludo. Quidditch matches aren't daily events, and there aren't many opportunities for you to earn extra money. Ludo's oily cheeks flushed with embarrassment. He realized that Atticus had seen him counting the money earlier. Taking a few guilty breaths, he fanned himself with the hat in his hand. It's not just a simple loan, Atticus. It's an investment, a loan from the goblins. Just wait and see. I'll earn back my capital with interest in no time. Atticus's interest was piqued, but he continued to regard Ludo with suspicion. The goblins are willing to lend you 5,000 galleons, Ludo. Did you mortgage your ministry appointment letter to them? Atticus asked quietly. Ludo groaned, unable to meet Atticus's gaze. Atticus shook his head in disbelief. If someone like Ludo could remain director for so many years, the department's discipline must be in shambles. When the topic shifted to gambling, Ludo's enthusiasm returned. Do you remember the drawing session before the first game of the Triwizard Tournament? You covered for Hermione Granger and let her get the gentlest Chinese fireball. Atticus raised an eyebrow. It was Dongmu who had orchestrated that, not him. However, he chose not to correct Ludo's mistake and continued to listen. But I heard that Hermione's odds have become very high again? Atticus inquired, pursing his lips. You gave me confidence, Atticus. What makes you so bold to place such a bet, Ludo? You know very well that if you lose this large investment, you might not only lose your position as director of the Department of Magical Transportation, but also your place in the UK. Are you that confident in yourself? Ludo, slightly annoyed, replied, Remember what I told you on the day of the Yule Ball? A group of Germans bet heavily that Granger wouldn't complete the game. That massive wager caused Granger's odds to skyrocket again. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Atticus. If I miss it, I'll regret it forever, so... Oh, I didn't intend to bet big at first, Atticus, Ludo said enthusiastically. Miss Granger would be very touched to know you support her so much. Before the competition started, not many people were optimistic about Miss Granger, and the odds of her winning were very high. But after the first competition, she became the favorite, and the goblins immediately lowered her odds. Even if I win, the returns will be unsatisfactory, and I might have to mortgage my house. Increase my investment. I immediately realized you were fully supporting Granger. Ah, of course, you might just want Hogwarts to win the final victory. When I returned that day, I tried to find a way to gather some gold to bet on Granger winning. And that's what happened afterward. So you put your career on the line? Atticus narrowed his eyes, fixing his sharp gaze on Ludo's face. Have you not considered that this might be a trap set by the goblins and the Germans together? Ludo, why are they so confident that Hermione cannot complete the game? You know, even if Hermione fails to win, as long as she persists to the end, a large amount of money will be wasted. There's clearly something wrong with the betting method of not being. Do you think they hope Hermione will get injured in the second or third round and withdraw from the competition? It's quite possible, isn't it? Ludo shrugged, seemingly oblivious to the concern. What if they do something underhanded? Aren't you worried about that? Aren't the goblins concerned? Ludo chuckled and patted Atticus Blaine on the arm. The goblins who shared the news with me had considered that possibility before accepting the bet. It's not unheard of, but they eventually agreed. Atticus, the goblins believe. Ludo looked at Atticus with admiration. No one would dare to harm the young wizards of Hogwarts under the watchful eyes of Dumbledore and Brian unless they have a death wish. Atticus was momentarily speechless. Indeed, this group of Germans might have stumbled upon some good fortune, but given the current circumstances, the likelihood of everything being above board seemed slim. Atticus regarded Ludo Bagman, a consummate gambler, and pondered the goblins' perspective on the bet. They seemed rather naive. Anyway, this is too suspicious, Atticus mused. I need to meet them and discover where their confidence stems from. That won't be easy, Atticus, Ludo replied. These people attract a lot of attention. Many are trying to uncover their secrets, and they know it, so they keep a low profile. After placing the bet, they vanished, and even the goblins don't know where they came from or where they are now. But surely the goblins know from whose vault all that gold was withdrawn, right? It said they settled in cash, Ludo explained, noticing Atticus's slight frown. You're worrying unnecessarily, Atticus. In my opinion, you should seize the opportunity, invest everything you have, and ensure Granger wins the game. That little girl figured out the secret of the golden egg, didn't she? Have you given her any hints? If you're hesitant to be too obvious, I can find a way. Atticus shot Ludo a sidelong glance, effectively silencing him. As they conversed, the activities on the Quidditch field below finally concluded, and the wizards began to leave. Ludo checked his watch and suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, I'm sorry, Atticus. I'd love to continue our chat, but I must return to the ministry. So what are your plans?" "Sorry, Ludo. I have other plans and won't be returning to London with you," Atticus replied calmly. "Well, good luck to you," Ludo said, clearly anticipating Atticus's intentions. After a moment's thought, he added, "By the way, the goblin who informed me is named Engel. It's responsible for related business at Gringotts Paris headquarters. We have a good relationship. If you decide to track down the Germans, you might want to have a chat with Engel. It might be withholding some information." With that, Ludo apparated to the platform below and hurriedly left through the repaired fireplace before the departing crowd arrived. End of this chapter. Chapter 783, Vogel or Rosier. Not many wizards were aware that Atticus Blaine maintained friendly relations with the highest echelons of goblin society, but among the goblins, it was no secret. Unfortunately, when Atticus arrived in Paris, old Barna was not at the headquarters. Responsible for the financial dealings of goblins across multiple countries, Barna was often busier than Atticus, frequently inspecting Gringotts branches abroad. This was a common occurrence. Fortunately, due to Atticus's esteemed reputation among goblins, it required little effort for him to meet Eng, who maintained a friendly relationship with Ludo. "Please wait a moment, Mr. Blaine," Eng said. Like the goblins managing Gringotts affairs in various countries, Eng, dressed in a sharp black suit and tie, epitomized the image of a shrewd business elite. After listening to Atticus's request, Eng showed no unnecessary surprise. With a snap of his fingers, Eng, a man in his prime, caused sparks to fly. A bookshelf in the office slowly rotated, revealing a thick circular metal door embedded in the wall behind it, adorned with intricate machinery. The poisonous potions and defensive magic attached to the dimly glowing metal door made Atticus raise an eyebrow. With a clear, resonant sound, the door swung halfway open. Through the gap, Atticus glimpsed an expanded room where a stack of magical contracts stretched from floor to ceiling, resembling supporting pillars. A stack of magical contracts, several inches thick, floated out from behind the metal door and landed in Enga's hand. "Is this the bet the Germans signed with you?" Atticus asked casually, glancing at the contract and carefully examining each magical signature. "That's not entirely accurate, Mr. Blaine," Eng replied, his unsmiling demeanor giving way to a shrewd smile familiar to wizards, with a hint of pride. "Although this is a gamble by the Goblin organization, you know we don't engage in loss-making ventures. You can surely detect the risks involved, can't you?" Atticus nodded thoughtfully. "So, how did this group introduce themselves?" "In fact, we'd love to see this gang do something foolish just to win the bet, Mr. Blaine," Eng said in a thick, meticulous voice. Atticus paused his reading, picked up the teacup on the wooden table, and took a sip of hot green tea. With a comfortable sigh, he looked at Eng with a smile. "They claim to be from Germany," Eng continued, "but when I spoke with them, I noticed not everyone spoke German. They were more accustomed to English, albeit with different accents. I suspect they hail from various countries." They described themselves as a team united by shared interests, particularly in the Triwizard Tournament. They had significant internal disagreements about the competition's outcome, but they all believed that Hermione Granger, having received less magical education than the other three champions, would likely face fatal danger in the next 2 rounds and withdraw from the competition. Atticus continued to peruse the names on the contract, asking in a casual tone, "When I discussed with Ludo whether there was a trap behind this, he assured me of your confidence in me and Dumbledore, and that this group wouldn't dare offend us." "And these patterns?" Atticus inquired. "This is a type of script once used by one of our goblin tribes," Eng explained. "It's very ancient and was only in circulation for a short time, so even knowledgeable wizards can't identify it. The lines on this contract indicate that before the end of in the Tri-Wizard tournament, if Miss Hermione Granger is subjected to any malicious attacks from either party or any relevant forces outside the competition venue, the entire bet amount will belong to the goblins. Atticus Blaine raised his eyebrows, immediately grasping the implication behind Engel's smile. He lowered his gaze to the contract in his hand, his eyes scanning the high-quality parchment. As he reread the terms of the bet, his expression shifted slightly, his attention caught by the intricate patterns decorating the paper's edges, which he had previously overlooked. "I appreciate your trust in me, but with all due respect, this doesn't align with the typical behavior of goblins," Atticus remarked. Engel beamed. "Your intelligence is indeed commendable, Mr. Blaine." Despite his amusement, Engel noticed a flicker of displeasure in Blaine's eyes, prompting him to quickly clarify. "Oh, please don't misunderstand, Mr. Blaine. Goblins value integrity more than wizards. Normally, we don't resort to such tactics, but this group clearly harbors ill intentions. This is merely a precaution. Of course, we would never initiate an attack on Miss Hermione Granger. Your friendship with Mr. Barna is paramount." "I hope so," Atticus replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He trusted Engel's words, not because of the goblin's character, but because of his own judgment. Setting down his teacup, Atticus once more sifted through the magical signatures. After a few pages, a name caught his eye, causing him to narrow his gaze and feel a jolt of surprise. Jasna Vogel. Among the list of individuals smuggled by Kingsley, excluding Angus Aeschylus, 47 people had been transported from Britain to Germany recently, each leaving the country alone at different times. Among them was Jasna Rosier. Vogel and Rosier? Atticus's brow furrowed. Neither surname was insignificant. With a flick of his fingers, the contract floated from the stack of papers and hovered before Engel. "Can you show me what this woman looks like, Engel?" Atticus asked. There was only one way to verify her appearance. Engel hesitated before reluctantly agreeing. "Well, Mr. Blaine, if you insist." "Thank you for your cooperation, Engel," Atticus said gently. "I assure you, you'll remain unharmed." With that, Atticus rose from the sofa and approached the goblin. Under Engel's patient gaze, he drew his wand and placed it between Engel's eyebrows. Extracting a goblin's memory differed slightly from that of a wizard. Atticus carefully pulled a few strands of pale green-silver threads from Engel's brow. With a flick of his wand, the threads spun rapidly, forming a subscreen before Atticus. The scene depicted a dimly lit tavern, bustling with patrons signing their names on parchment at nearby tables and benches. Atticus manipulated the image with his wand, and under Engel's guidance, his eyes quickly focused on a woman who had just signed her name and handed the bet to Engel. She wore a gray trench coat, slim-fitting blue jeans, and a black turtleneck sweater. Her appearance was flawless, though her expression was slightly cold and sharp. After observing the woman for a moment, Atticus continued to rotate the three-dimensional image, scrutinizing the other patrons in the bar. It was evident that those signing their names were partly focused on this Jasna. It is evident that she holds a special status among this group. "If I want to find this Vogel," Atticus Blaine said, narrowing his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blaine, but there's nothing we can do about this," Engel replied, seemingly prepared for the question. He maintained a calm demeanor as he continued. "Miss Vogel is not a client of Gringotts. In fact, neither she nor the wizards who placed bets with her have accounts with us. Each of them manages their own wealth independently, so we have no information on their current whereabouts." End of this chapter. Chapter 784. Stop reporting the Spree River, originating from the northern foot of the Lausitz Mountains in southeastern Germany, meanders through expansive swamps and plains before finally merging with the Havel River in Berlin. In February, the Havel River swelled to flood stage. The river's wide channel was a tumult of rushing water, creating white, fish scale-like splashes. Both banks were lined with lush spruce trees, their evergreen presence offering a touch of comfort to Berlin's early morning, though they couldn't dispel the gloom of the thick gray haze enveloping the city. Louise watched an elderly couple stroll by the river until they vanished into the mist. Her gaze then drifted to the turbulent river, a sense of melancholy washing over her. The rich moisture in the air condensed into crystal dewdrops on her long eyelashes. As her lashes fluttered, the dewdrops rolled down, their cold touch unsettling her. She quickly wiped them away, losing interest in the scenery of this unfamiliar city. As she walked into the woods by the river, a small wooden house emerged from behind the tall forest leaves. Situated in the Berlin suburbs, this house was designed for rent to foreign tourists. Similar lodgings dotted the area, each spaced far apart for tranquility. Approaching the door, Louise hesitated, not opening it immediately. It was her third day in this city, having arrived via something called a portkey. This remarkable method of instant travel across vast distances was beyond her imagination. If Muggles could use such a means of travel, the world would change dramatically. However, this method had its drawbacks. Traveling by portkey felt like being flushed into a high-speed rotating toilet. She marveled at how wizards endured this sensation. At least she hadn't vomited after her first portkey trip, though she had lain on the couch for 2 hours before recovering. Wizards undoubtedly possessed enviable abilities. Over the past 2 days, Louise had been astonished countless times. She watched Kingsley wave his wand to ignite the fireplace, saw him make a kitchen knife chop potatoes without entering the kitchen, and observed clothes scrubbing themselves in a laundry tub until they were threadbare. "Sorry, I'm not very good at household magic," Kingsley admitted apologetically after accidentally twisting one of Louise's coats with magic. In short, wizards had all sorts of incredible methods, yet in some ways they seemed quite antiquated. When Louise saw Kingsley using a quill to write letters on parchment, she was stunned. The quill had been obsolete in her society for at least a century, and she couldn't believe wizards still used owls to send messages. "Why not use the phone?" she asked, pointing to the sofa that had turned black. "If you need to contact someone urgently, a phone is much more convenient than writing a letter." "Telephones are indeed convenient, but most wizards aren't accustomed to using them, Louise," Kingsley explained in a low voice. "Muggle technology is difficult to popularize among wizards. Of course, we have an easier way to contact others, the flu network." He introduced a new term that Louise didn't understand, gesturing toward the fireplace with its strong flames. "But we can't use it now. The domestic flu network is closely monitored by the Ministry of Magic in various countries, and we are entering the country illegally. Using the flu network will most likely expose us," Atticus Blaine explained. Louise nodded in understanding, suppressing her curiosity about the flu network. Although Atticus and Kingsley were both present, Atticus held a higher status as a wizard. In terms of personal demeanor, Atticus seemed friendlier and more reassuring to her. Kingsley, on the other hand, was taciturn and intimidating at first glance. Most of the time, he was preoccupied with his own tasks in the house, which only fueled Louise's desire to learn more about magic and Atticus. Her plan to inquire further was thwarted. A strong wind from the river caused the spruce trees surrounding the wooden house to sway, their branches and leaves rustling. Louise barely had time to cover her hair when she heard a gentle voice behind her. "Why don't you go in?" Startled, Louise took a sharp breath and turned around. Seeing Atticus Blaine approaching the house along the cobblestone path, her expression brightened, but she quickly composed herself, pursing her lips. "Oh, well, I was just planning to go in." Click. Kingsley, inside the house, seemed to sense something. Before Louise could turn the doorknob, he swiftly opened the door, causing her to stumble slightly. "You're back, Mr. Blaine," Kingsley exclaimed, supporting Louise. He ignored the dissatisfied look she gave him and looked over her head at Atticus with joy. "Let's go inside and talk, Kingsley." Atticus nodded slightly. The living room of the wooden house was not spacious. With a few single sofas adorned with soft cushions and a low, dark wooden table, the space felt even more cramped. A tire-shaped brass chandelier hanging from the ceiling added to the sense of confinement. Atticus stepped onto the thick woolen carpet, glanced at the complete elk hide hanging above the stone fireplace, and smacked his lips. Turning back, he saw Louise standing by a sofa, wringing her hands and watching him intently. "Everyone, please take a seat," he invited, accepting a teacup from Kingsley. The faint aroma of herbs wafted up, and Atticus wrinkled his nose in mild dissatisfaction. After taking a sip of the unique tea, he sat down, naturally assuming a position of leadership with Kingsley and Louise. Some people truly possess natural leadership qualities, Louise thought as she sat down. Although she and Kingsley had moved in first, Atticus naturally took on the role of the house's owner, yet she felt no sense of discord. Without any formal greeting, Kingsley and Louise both focused on Atticus, who was acutely aware of their urgency. After another sip of tea, he exhaled and rubbed his brow. "A new suspect has come to our attention," Atticus announced. "Jasna." Louise's eyes filled with confusion, while Kingsley's eyebrows twitched slightly. "Jasna Rosier. Is this the name on the smuggling list?" Atticus continued. Angus Aeschylus and Jasna Rosier did not leave England together, likely to avoid detection. Kingsley didn't question how Atticus had identified this name. He simply chose to trust him. "Rosier," Kingsley repeated, his expression darkening. "Could there be something more behind this?" "It has nothing to do with Voldemort," Atticus replied calmly and confidently. "In fact, Jasna, the witch, likely doesn't use her real surname in the UK. Her true name should be Jasna Vogel." "Jasna Vogel?" Kingsley's brows furrowed. The name seemed familiar, but he couldn't recall where he had heard it. "Kingsley," Atticus suddenly called, drawing his attention. After receiving a response, Kingsley inquired, "You've been writing to Dumbledore lately to update him on our investigation's progress, haven't you?" Kingsley was taken aback. Atticus Blaine already knew about this, so he was puzzled as to why it was being brought up again. Nevertheless, after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Yes, Mr. Blaine, I have been writing to Albus." Atticus nodded. After a brief silence, his expression remained calm, yet his gaze was unwavering and resolute as he looked at Kingsley. "From now on, until this matter is completely resolved, we will temporarily cease all reports to Dumbledore regarding the investigation's progress. Do you understand, Kingsley?" End of this chapter. Chapter 785, Parting the Clouds and Seeing the Moon. In the living room, a heavy silence hung in the air, casting a somber mood over the gathering. Kingsley stared intently at Atticus Blaine, whose expression was as inscrutable as a still pond. His lips moved slightly, as if to speak, but no words emerged. Yet, the subtle shifts in his demeanor spoke volumes, hinting at unspoken doubts. Louise, a trainee reporter with a keen eye for detail, observed the interaction closely. Her gaze flitted between Atticus and Kingsley, sensing the tension that simmered beneath the surface. The name Dumbledore had surfaced repeatedly in their conversation, piquing her curiosity. From the context and the reverence with which they spoke of him, Louise surmised that Dumbledore held a position of authority above Atticus. If Atticus Blaine was the vice president of the Wizards' Federation, then surely Dumbledore was the chairman. Her intuition was spot on, but questions lingered. Why had Atticus instructed Kingsley to halt his reporting? Was it a political maneuver or something more sinister? Louise's eyes widened with apprehension as she considered the possibility that Dumbledore might be aligned with those who persecuted Fraser. It wasn't beyond the realm of possibility, she mused, given the existence of the Wizard's secrecy law and the audacity of those who flouted it to harm Muggles. According to Fraser, they even conducted experiments on pregnant women and infants, a monstrous act that would incite global outrage if exposed. Such heinous deeds suggested a powerful, perhaps official, backing. Perhaps Atticus had discerned something amiss, prompting him to leave Kingsley to investigate independently. Was Kingsley Shacklebolt part of Dumbledore's faction? With this thought, Louise regarded Kingsley with suspicion, instinctively inching closer to Atticus. If a confrontation ensued, Kingsley would have the upper hand physically, but Atticus was renowned as the most formidable wizard of his time. "I understand, Mr. Blaine," Kingsley finally said, meeting Atticus's steady gaze. His nod of agreement was unexpected, leaving Louise, who had anticipated a heated exchange, momentarily stunned. Even Atticus seemed taken aback. "I thought convincing you would require more effort, Kingsley," Atticus remarked softly. "If you would explain, that would be ideal," Kingsley replied, his voice gravely yet tinged with a smile. "But I trust you have valid reasons for keeping this from Albus." Atticus sipped his tea, savoring its unique flavor despite knowing it would never be his favorite. "Thank you for your trust, Kingsley," he acknowledged. Unlike Sirius and Black, Kingsley was neither a subordinate nor a close friend. His allegiance lay with Dumbledore, yet he was willing to cooperate with Atticus on this matter. In return, Atticus vowed solemnly, "All my actions are to ensure that those who harmed Hermione, Fraser, and innocent muggles face justice." "So, what should we do next?" Louise inquired, her initial disappointment at the lack of drama giving way to renewed interest in the unfolding events. Suddenly, Louise felt a stirring in her heart. She had subconsciously overlooked Atticus Blaine's intense focus. His pursuit of the murderer was driven more by a desire for justice for his students than by any personal vendetta. He believed he was acting on behalf of Fraser and the ordinary people unaware of the magical world. Louise, who had been cooped up for 2 days, asked impatiently, "Are we looking for Aeschylus and Jasna, or Wittelsbach? Do you have any contacts here?" The flames in the fireplace kept the temperature in the narrow living room high. Atticus's coat, which he had removed, twisted through the air and landed neatly on a hook nailed to the wooden wall. This display of magic left Louise momentarily dazed. Atticus stood up and moved to the sliding window, where countless tiny droplets had condensed. He gazed through the foggy glass at the sky outside, where the mist swirled in the strong wind. They were close to uncovering the truth, just one step away from clarity. Fraser mentioned that after leaving Italy, he was taken to a new location to assist with research. Atticus finally spoke after a long silence, turning to Louise without directly answering her question. "This place is most likely Berlin. The dark wizards we're searching for are probably in this city. They likely have a testing ground here." Eliminating this group's stronghold was essential, but the challenge lay in determining the best approach. Should we inform the German Ministry of Magic? Kingsley hesitated, suggesting the idea. Atticus understood Kingsley's concerns. After dismantling this gang, they would undoubtedly need the cooperation of the local Ministry of Magic for the aftermath. However, Kingsley lacked law enforcement authority in Germany, and technically, Atticus couldn't interfere with the German Wizarding Society without the Federation's authorization. "Let's locate this stronghold first, and then," Atticus shook his head after a moment's thought. They knew little about the German Ministry of Magic's internal workings, and there might be informants within. Even if not, if the German ministry was anything like the British ministry, keeping such a secret would be impossible. News would soon spread about a ruthless gang of dark wizards conducting secret experiments on muggles. Therefore, Atticus decided against negotiating with the German ministry for the time being. Even if they expressed strong dissatisfaction later, there would be little they could do beyond voicing their discontent. "Are you sure we shouldn't involve the German ministry, Mr. Blaine?" Kingsley remained hesitant. "Finding these people is incredibly challenging. To avoid drawing attention, we can't deploy aurors on a large scale. Plus, considering Miss Granger's situation, we might not have much time." "We don't need an investigation, Kingsley," Atticus replied with a smile. "And I doubt the German ministry has any substantial information on Aeschylus and Wittelsbach." Louise, who had been listening intently, immediately noticed that Atticus had omitted mentioning Jasna, whom he had discussed with her and Kingsley earlier. "What about Jasna Vogel?" she pointed out. "Oh, regarding her," Atticus's smile turned enigmatic. "Perhaps we can try our luck at her home. Maybe her parents know where she is." End of this chapter. Chapter 786, Anton Vogel. Where is this? Louise wondered aloud. Just a moment ago, they had been at a resort hotel on the outskirts of Berlin. Now, with a sense of suffocation and disorientation, she found herself sprawled on the ground in a field of rapeseed and winter wheat. After taking several deep breaths, the world around her stopped spinning. She glanced at Atticus Blaine and Kingsley, who had landed gracefully beside her. Muttering under her breath about perverted wizards, she accepted Atticus's outstretched hand and rose unsteadily to her feet. A gentle breeze carried a fresh, invigorating scent, and Louise twirled around, taking in her surroundings. The gloomy Berlin sky had vanished, replaced by a brilliant jewel-like blue. Nearby, a clear river meandered through the wilderness, reflecting the sky's hue and producing a melodious sound akin to wind chimes. It was so enchanting, it seemed as if it had flowed straight out of a fairy tale. Standing on the high ground of the field, Louise balanced on her tiptoes, mesmerized by the river that sparkled like countless gems. She was momentarily lost in the beauty of the scene, her gaze sweeping over the golden farmland stretching to the horizon. A sense of profound comfort and excitement washed over her. "We're outside Bonn now," Atticus remarked, his smile softening in the presence of such natural beauty. He and Louise wandered through the field, soon spotting a faint silhouette behind the swaying wheat stalks, a rotating black shadow that must be the mill's fan blade. "Let's go," Atticus said, leading the way toward the mill. "Before I came to find you, I did some research. Some old friends helped me discover this place. It's isolated from the world, a perfect spot for retirement." Kingsley, trailing behind, watched Atticus with admiration. Atticus's abilities never ceased to amaze him. Yet, it was curious that Mr. Blaine had managed to find this place without knowing Josna Vogel's whereabouts. Kingsley quickly dismissed the thought, focusing instead on navigating the slippery, weed-covered field ridges. "As for our previous investigation, Mr. Blaine," Kingsley began, "those dark wizards capable of creating cursed seed separations. Just last night, new information came from the ministry." Atticus tilted his head slightly, indicating he was listening. "Based on the information you provided earlier, we tracked down a suspect temporarily residing in the UK. However, after thorough investigation, we ruled him out," Kingsley explained. "Unfortunately, our efforts in other countries haven't been as successful. In the Far East, our agents located a person of interest, but he refused to cooperate and fled after injuring our operatives. The incident drew the attention of the local Ministry of Magic, forcing our team to withdraw. Meanwhile, the individual in France had immigrated to the United States 2 years ago. Given the timeline and lack of motive, we decided not to pursue him further." Atticus's expression darkened slightly, his lips tightening. That virulence character had deceived him. "What about the others, Kingsley?" Atticus inquired. "Our investigation suggests that the 2 individuals in Albania are no longer around," Kingsley replied. "You might have heard about this. Last August, there was an internal conflict among dark wizards in Albania. One of the individuals on our list died in that skirmish, and the other fled. Many wizards who were involved have since left Albania, and their current whereabouts remain unknown." Coughing softly, Atticus Blaine scratched his cheek, choosing to remain silent. Kingsley continued his report. 2 individuals from Germany. "According to our sources, Friedrich Callan and his disciples traveled to Greece last month, seemingly to explore ancient ruins. August Rahman, on the other hand, is a traveler. Our team located his address, but his Muggle neighbors informed us that he frequently travels abroad and rarely stays in the country. We searched his house, but found no clues regarding his whereabouts." Atticus nodded tearfully, still silent. They followed the winding path through the wild terrain, gradually approaching a windmill by the river. The mill stood on a fenced farm spanning over 10 acres, half of which was planted with various vegetables. The pigs and chickens within the enclosure appeared well cared for. Adjacent to the mill was a 2-story wooden house, its gray boards suggesting it had stood there for many years. "Oh, sorry," Louise exclaimed, her eyes briefly lingering on the house before being drawn to the stone mill in front of it, which spun on its own without the aid of livestock or machinery. She failed to notice Atticus's sudden halt. "What happened?" Kingsley asked, still some distance from the farm's fence. Seeing Atticus stop abruptly and look ahead with a calm demeanor, Kingsley immediately became alert, his wand slipping into his palm. "There's some warning magic ahead," Atticus said lightly. "I suspect it's meant to alert the owner of unexpected visitors. To ensure a pleasant conversation later, I think we should knock on the door." As he spoke, Atticus raised his wand, sending a bright spark from its tip. The spark breached the guarded area ahead and exploded like fireworks, the sudden noise echoing across the wilderness. Boom! The response was swift. The gentle breeze suddenly shifted, and after a sharp explosion, a small figure emerged from the void, landing in front of Atticus. "Oh my God!" Louise gasped, nearly slipping into the fields on either side. But when she saw what had appeared, her eyes widened in surprise. "Is this a dwarf?" "Actually, wizards refer to them as house elves," Atticus replied with a smile, looking down at the elf. Judging by its loose skin and abundant white hair, this house elf was quite old, much like Creature from Sirius's family. Atticus maintained a friendly smile as he observed the elf. Initially, the old elf regarded him with wary, unfriendly eyes, but upon realizing who had disturbed its master's rest, the vigilance in its tennis ball-sized eyes faded, replaced by fear and confusion. "Atticus Blaine," the elf squeaked in a voice that belied its aged appearance. It took a few steps back in fear, its gaze fixed solely on Atticus, ignoring Louise and Kingsley behind him. "Hello," Atticus nodded. "What should I call you?" "Hayne." The elf hesitated before bowing respectfully. "I am Hayne, at your service, Mr. Blaine." "Well, Hayne, I apologize for disturbing you in your master's peaceful life. I believe I have the right place. This is the home of President Anton Vogel, correct?" "President Anton Vogel?" Kingsley was initially stunned, but as realization dawned, his eyes widened like Louise's, disbelief etched on his face. "Incredible. I remember Anton Vogel. Is he still alive?" The shock made Kingsley forget his usual composure, and he exclaimed in surprise. The elf named Hayne glanced at him, acknowledging the astonishment in the air. Atticus Blaine glanced at Kingsley with displeasure, yet he refrained from voicing any criticism, offering only a subtle nod. "It seems we were fortunate and didn't search in vain," Atticus remarked, though his eyes betrayed no hint of amusement. He gazed at the weathered wooden house, seemingly untouched by time, and his voice carried an undertone of solemnity and authority. "Hayne, could you please send a message to President Vogel? Let him know that Atticus Blaine is here and wishes to speak with him personally." End of this chapter. Chapter 77, An Old Friend. In the past 2 years, no one in the European magical world has shone more brightly than Atticus Blaine. Resisting the request of such a renowned wizard is undoubtedly a daunting task for a house elf. Yet Hayne, the old elf, stood firm under the immense pressure. Bowing deeply, he spoke in an infinitely apologetic tone. "I'm very sorry, dear Mr. Blaine. The master wishes to maintain his peaceful life undisturbed. He hasn't received guests in nearly 20 years, except for old friends." "Sorry, Hayne, but I must meet with President Vogel today," Atticus replied calmly, his unwavering stance making it clear to Hayne that he was determined. The old elf gasped, fear and a hint of despair flickering in his cloudy eyes. His fingers, hanging by his side and nearly touching his knees, trembled slightly, as if contemplating the possibility of expelling Blaine. Ultimately, Hayne made a rational decision. "Please wait a moment, Mr. Blaine," he said, bowing to Atticus before disapparating in a flustered manner. "It's unbelievable that Anton Vogel is still alive. I thought he had passed long ago. How old is he?" Kingsley asked, unable to contain his astonishment after Hayne left. "About 110 years old, I believe," Atticus replied, glancing at Louise, whose mouth twitched in surprise at the age. He smiled and added, "Since Dumbledore is still alive, it's not so unbelievable that Vogel isn't dead, right?" Despite his words, Kingsley struggled to digest the shock of the revelation. He finally understood why Jasna Vogel's name had seemed familiar. "Please don't forget, there's a muggle here," Louise interjected, looking between Atticus and Kingsley with frustration. "Can someone kindly tell me who Anton Vogel is?" 60 years ago, he served as president of the International Confederation of Wizards, Atticus explained succinctly. "Wow, a retired big shot," Louise remarked, clicking her tongue. She blinked, slightly confused, and asked, "So, you think Jasna Vogel is his descendant? How did you figure that out?" "Vogel isn't a rare surname. One of my college classmates had that name." Kingsley also looked to Atticus for a convincing explanation, but Atticus merely smiled faintly. "It's just a feeling," he said. "A feeling." Louise wrinkled her nose. "Okay, but what if President Vogel doesn't want to see us? You wizards probably don't allow breaking into private homes, right?" Before Atticus could respond, Hayne reappeared before them. From the surprise on the elf's face, Atticus knew they hadn't been turned away. "Please follow me, Mr. Blaine," the house elf said, nodding at Atticus. He turned and slowly raised his long arm, erasing something in the void. Louise heard the sound of chains snapping in the air as Atticus followed the poorly dressed elf named Hayne. "I've never been a guest in a wizard's home," Louise admitted nervously after crossing the fence. She dared not look around, feeling that every inch of space was filled with mystery. Swallowing nervously, she turned to Kingsley and whispered, "Do you wizards have any strange customs? If the old president asks me to kneel, I won't agree." Hayne, leading the way, heard Louise's muttering. He turned and glanced at her. his wrinkled skin trembling slightly with a hint of disdain in his eyes. It was clear to him that this woman was not a wizard. A humble muggle stepping into his master's house was undoubtedly an insult, company of his master. If it weren't for the fact that she arrived with Atticus Blaine, the old man Hayne might have tossed her straight into the river. "Quiet, Louise," Kingsley softly admonished, his voice tinged with nervousness. Although Anton Vogel was not particularly beloved by wizards during his tenure, the public was aware of his contributions. People might even have celebrated his resignation, but he remained a respected wizard who had left an indelible mark on the history of magic. As the former president of the International Federation of Wizards, Vogel wielded significant power during his time. Kingsley, lacking the strength and status of Atticus, couldn't help but feel a bit anxious in the presence of such a legendary figure. Where house elves are present, cleanliness is never an issue. Despite the room's age, it was impeccably clean, with the wooden floor, marked by the passage of time, spotless. Though the sun shone brightly outside, the room was dimly lit by candles, casting a somber atmosphere. Entering a wizard's home for the first time, especially one belonging to a former luminary, Louise couldn't contain her curiosity and glanced around eagerly. However, her disappointment was palpable. The room lacked magical artifacts, appearing primitive and outdated, as if it belonged to an old man who had long withdrawn from society. Hayne led them through the living room to the backyard. A banyan tree, likely planted when the house was built, dominated the yard. Its vast canopy shaded a quarter of the backyard, with countless aerial roots hanging down like a forest. At the edge of the tree's shadow, a deck chair rested, occupied by an old man wrapped in a nightgown. This was indeed a very old man. The wrinkles on his face resembled the bark of the banyan tree. His chin bore a short, manageable beard, gray and colorless like his hair. Life was slowly ebbing away from this old man, leaving him with only a few years. Even Louise realized this when she saw Anton Vogel. Once a prominent figure in the European magical world, Vogel was now a frail old man reclining in a chair, watching as the group led by Hein entered the backyard. Atticus positioned himself a dozen feet away. The breeze stirred Atticus's soft, shiny gray hair and Vogel's gray beard simultaneously. Their eyes, though clouded by age, were steady and sharp, meeting in midair with the weight of history. Silence enveloped the scene as the two wizards regarded each other calmly. Kingsley's heart raced as he stood further back, feeling as if two eras were confronting each other. A wave of excitement surged through him, echoing like a magnificent sound in his ears. Louise, wanting to greet the old man with basic Muggle etiquette, found herself stifled by the inexplicable atmosphere and remained silent. "The look in your eyes reminds me of an old friend, President Blaine," Vogel finally spoke, breaking the silence. His voice, weathered by time, carried the echoes of history and a hint of nostalgia. President Blaine? It was an intriguing title, one that hadn't been used since Atticus was elected vice president of the International Federation of Wizards after expelling Vitia on the night of the Quidditch final, middle of last year. "I hope it's not Dumbledore, Mr. Vogel," Atticus Blaine remarked with a smile. End of this chapter. Chapter 788, Clearing the Name for Justice. "Hey, Dumbledore!" Atticus Blaine's words seemed to stir something within Anton Vogel, who was teetering on the brink of death. He coughed violently, his frail body shaking so much that it seemed as if it might collapse entirely. The elf, Hein, quickly rushed to Vogel's side, gently patting his back and offering him herbal tea from a nearby three-legged stool. "My apologies," Vogel finally managed to say, his breathing settling into a more regular rhythm. He looked up to see Atticus and his two companions still standing in the yard. "I haven't entertained guests here for a long time. I've neglected my manners. Hein, could you fetch some stools from the house and prepare tea for our guests?" "Ah, there's no need to trouble yourself," Atticus replied smoothly. With a flick of his wand, 3 plush chintz armchairs appeared before Vogel. Atticus gestured for the somewhat reserved Kingsley and Louise to take a seat, settling into one himself with an air of polite composure. Despite this, Hein disapparated to prepare tea for the unexpected visitors. "Now that you've mentioned Dumbledore," Vogel croaked, his voice barely above a whisper, "how is he doing?" The fact that this nearly buried old man referred to him as President Blaine indicated he was not entirely out of touch with the world. Dumbledore's actions were always a topic of interest, so there was no need to waste time on pleasantries. Atticus maintained his polite smile, not pointing out the obvious. He met Vogel's gaze, eyes that were dimming with the fire of life, yet remained as calm as a master of occlumency. Dumbledore? Well, he continues to dedicate himself to the work he loves. Vogel's smile was enigmatic, its meaning unclear. Dedicate his life. You're right. A wizard like him spends most of his life at Hogwarts. Oh, that's not what I meant, Mr. Vogel, Atticus interjected, shaking his head slightly. I mean, he is still striving for the tranquility and peace of the European magical world. Tranquility and peace in the wizarding world? Vogel's gray eyebrows twitched, a flicker of emotion breaking through the ice in his eyes. Yet, he merely shook his head softly. The authority of the International Confederation of Wizards ended with Dumbledore's tacit approval. It is undeniable, Atticus nodded, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? Excessive concentration of power can easily lead to dictatorship, which could plunge the entire European wizarding world into chaos. Vogel's eyelids fluttered, indicating his disagreement, but he did not voice it. Instead, he offered a hoarse smile. No wonder they call you Dumbledore's successor, President Blaine, Vogel remarked, observing Atticus, who had risen to prominence at a young age without losing his integrity. In a world where magical education was declining, Atticus's profound magical knowledge and lack of ambition to alter the status quo were remarkable. Vogel's gaze shifted past Atticus to Kingsley, whom he deemed unworthy of attention, and lingered on Louise for a few seconds. Despite his failing eyesight, Vogel recognized that the young girl accompanying Atticus was a Muggle. The current vice president and retired former president of the International Federation of Wizards discussing such matters in front of a Muggle was indeed intriguing, especially considering the breach of the wizarding statute of secrecy. In the wizarding world, Hayne appeared out of thin air, holding a tray with a teapot emitting white-hot steam and 3 simple teacups. He carefully prepared tea for the guests. "Oh, thank you," Louise said, accepting the teacup from Hayne. She stood up, flustered and flattered, and bowed to him. As she straightened, she noticed everyone in the yard, including Hayne, was watching her. "What happened?" she asked, her face turning crimson. She looked at Atticus Blaine, feeling lost. I did something wrong, didn't I? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand your customs," Louise apologized to Hayne again. Hayne did not respond, but looked to his master for guidance. Receiving a nod, he placed the teapot on a triangular stool, ignored Louise's apology, and apparated out of the backyard. "There's nothing rude about what you did. Please sit down, Louise," Atticus said gently. A moment of silence followed, with no one speaking first. Atticus gazed at the endless, refreshing rapeseed fields for a while, then turned his attention back to the silent old wooden house. In a casual tone, he asked, "Have you been living here alone since you retired?" "President Blaine," Vogel replied calmly, "I believe you didn't come here just to inquire about the living conditions of an old man nearing the end of his days, did you?" "Why not?" Atticus smiled slightly, showing no embarrassment. "I have always believed that we should pay more attention to the living conditions of wizards who have made significant contributions to the magical world after their retirement. We should organize regular visits and perhaps invite them to teach the new generation of young wizards so they understand that today's peace was hard won," Atticus said meaningfully. Vogel's expression did not improve upon hearing this. During his tenure, the European magical world was in turmoil, and his well-known decisions had inadvertently fueled the flames of war. "All right," Vogel muttered, closing his eyes as if he had fallen asleep. However, his pursed lips suggested that the retired president was not as calm as he appeared. Sensing the tension, Atticus suppressed his smile. "Jasna Vogel. Mr. Vogel, is she part of the Vogel family?" Atticus inquired. Vogel seemed to have truly fallen asleep, his eyelids closed, showing no reaction to the name. This did not deter Atticus, who turned slightly, allowing Louise to be more visible to Vogel. "This is Miss Louise Aundair, and as you can see, Mr. Vogel," Atticus said, "she is a Muggle. Currently, Miss Aundair has encountered some unfortunate events. Her brother, also a Muggle, was killed by a group of malevolent wizards." Atticus paused, then continued calmly. In fairy. In fairy? Louise blinked, her heart heavy. Was this the spell that killed Fraser? Anton Vogel's eyelids trembled slightly, but remained closed. Based on clues provided by Miss Onder, we discovered that her brother's murder was not an accident. The perpetrators were a group of fanatics seeking to understand the origins of magic. While many wizards and scholars study this subject, there is clear evidence that this group conducts experiments on muggles, babies, and pregnant women. They also coerce talented muggles into serving them, and if these muggles lose their value, they are killed. This is what happened to Miss Onder's brother. According to our investigation, Atticus said calmly, Jasna Vogel is one of the core members of this organization. The breeze carried away the warmth in the air, leaving a chill in its wake. In the courtyard, the temperature plummeted noticeably. Vogel suddenly opened his eyes. Despite the age etched into his features, his sharp gaze pierced through the shadows and fixed on Atticus Blaine's face. Are you seeking justice for these muggles? Vogel inquired, his voice carrying a hint of skepticism. Atticus responded in a cold tone, No, I'm not. I'm simply trying to clear my name in the pursuit of justice. End of this chapter. Chapter 789, another one. Instantly, the atmosphere in the courtyard grew tense. Atticus Blaine lay on the recliner, unmoving. Perhaps he no longer had the strength to rise, yet the aura of authority emanating from his aged frame was palpable, causing Kingsley and Louise to catch their breath. This was not the result of powerful magic, but rather the influence accumulated by Atticus, who had held high positions and experienced the ravages of war. Kingsley glanced at Atticus, who remained unfazed, a hint of worry in his eyes. He was uncertain how Atticus had determined that Jasna Rozier's true identity was Jasna Vogel, the core of this malevolent force. Anton Vogel was a legendary wizard, a former German minister of magic and president of the International Federation of Wizards, now long retired. They had no personal connection with him, and their visit was tantamount to an accusation. Vogel could easily dismiss them. Interrogating someone of Anton Vogel's stature without permission was unthinkable, at least for Kingsley, who lacked the courage. They had entered Germany clandestinely. Unlike Kingsley's apprehension, Atticus faced Vogel's cold gaze with calm determination. He maintained his composure, silently conveying his resolve. You are helping muggles persecute their own people. Vogel finally spoke, his voice icy. Excuse me. Before Atticus could respond, Louise reacted fiercely. Initially, she had held Vogel in high regard, given his esteemed position in wizard society and his age. But his words shattered her respect, and anger swiftly overtook her reason. Louise leapt from her stool, ignoring Kingsley's warning glance, and shouted, Help muggles persecute their own people? Louise laughed bitterly. Mr. Vogel, perhaps you didn't hear what Atticus just said. There's a group of wizards committing heinous acts. Yes, they are wizards, but they've killed many people. They're conducting unspeakable experiments on pregnant women and babies. In our society, such actions might prompt Parliament to reinstate the death penalty. Breathing heavily, Louise glared at the silent Vogel, pausing before continuing in frustration. If wizards have laws, and I know there's a wizard's statute of secrecy, surely you have other laws, right? Do your laws permit such atrocities, or do you not consider muggles human? It seems, Atticus interjected slowly, observing the silent Vogel, I needn't bother refuting your absurd remarks, Mr. Vogel. I see. Vogel remained largely unmoved by Louise's passionate protest. His gaze returned to Atticus, scrutinizing this contemporary legend. You truly resemble Dumbledore. You believe there's no distinction between wizards and muggles. You hope for greater integration into muggle society, ignoring the growing power of muggles and the declining status of wizards. You pretend not to see the impending danger. Mr. Vogel. Atticus interrupted the old man's murmurs with a touch of impatience. He traced the rim of his teacup with his fingers, his expression serene as he watched the rippling brown liquid. I'm genuinely surprised. I thought these ideas had vanished half a century ago, yet here they are, presented to me today. Do you think this is mere fear-mongering, President Blaine? Vogel's hands were tightly clasped, his chest rising and falling slightly, his eyes as sharp as a hawk's. It's not true, Atticus began, his voice steady and unwavering. Atticus Blaine gestured for Louise to sit down and then spoke calmly. Oh, I'm truly humbled that even after retiring for so many years, you still concern yourself with the safety of the magical world. I rarely ponder such matters. Vogel pursed his lips, his breath growing faint. What you say is true. Muggles are indeed becoming stronger, while wizards seem to be in decline. But what's there to lament? Atticus smiled. Isn't this the natural order of things? Over the years, Muggles have relentlessly advanced, striving for technology to better serve them and for society to become more civilized and progressive. In contrast, we wizards remain stagnant. The prevailing sentiment in wizard society is to cling to tradition. Many ancient families still insist on marrying within their bloodline to preserve purity. Wizards resist progress and social change. Eventually, the balance of power will shift, and this evolution is entirely normal. Atticus tilted his head, his piercing gaze making Vogel realize that Atticus Blaine understood precisely what he intended to convey. If you're truly concerned about the fate of wizards, introspection, self-change, and active learning are what you should pursue. Rather than, Atticus's mouth curled slightly, a hint of irony in his tone, hoping to enslave, conquer, and control Muggle society. History has shown that such extreme ideas are doomed to fail because... Atticus turned to Louise, then back to Vogel. Wizards and Muggles are both human beings, and we are no more noble than Muggles. Vogel's chest heaved with anger, his eyes blazing. Kingsley watched with growing concern. Atticus was undoubtedly correct, yet the social climate during Vogel's tenure was different. He feared that if Anton Vogel were truly provoked, they couldn't resort to using the Imperius Curse or force the former president of the International Federation of Wizards to speak the truth. As the conversation unfolded, Louise's brow furrowed, realizing that the Wizarding Society's attitude towards Muggles was likely not as amicable as she had thought. It seemed they held a disdainful view of Muggles who lacked magical understanding, while simultaneously fearing the larger Muggle population might one day rise against them, much like the persecution of pagans in old tales. So, what would you do? Vogel asked. If you wish to prevent the eventual downfall of wizards, if you want wizards to change, you must know this will lead to. Wizards will bleed rivers of blood, Atticus said calmly, but they will ultimately be reborn from it. His tone was serious, and Kingsley's lips tightened. A chilling sensation crept up his spine, making his skin prickle. What did he mean? Was Mr. Blaine planning a violent purge within the wizarding world to eradicate its ills? Even Anton Vogel felt a shiver at the sharpness in Atticus Blaine's words. In a daze, he seemed to glimpse an era engulfed in flames. Are you going to do it yourself? Vogel's head lifted slightly from the pillow, though his frail body prevented him from sitting up. Would Dumbledore allow it? Oh, Atticus laughed, as if the stern voice from moments ago had been a mere dream. This is arduous and exhausting work. Why should I do it myself? Just wait and see, Mr. Anton Vogel. You will witness the change. From the sky to the earth, a plume of smoke rose, obscuring the sunlight. The world plunged into darkness. Vogel gazed intently at Atticus Blaine, who sat across from him. He studied the young man's face, his steadfast eyes, and suddenly, Vogel let out a gasp, followed by a chuckle. Again, he murmured. Old Vogel closed his eyes, his voice barely more than a whisper, almost as if he were speaking to himself. If you want to know anything, just ask Hain. It knows everything about me. End of this chapter. Chapter 790, difficult to comment. Miss Jasna is the great-granddaughter of the Old Master. On the banks of the rippling Rhine River, beside a small mill with creaking wind blades, the elf Hain spoke in a somber tone. Great-granddaughter? Atticus Blaine's eyes fixed on Hain, a furrow forming between his brows, hinting at his skepticism. Judging by the age, it doesn't add up. And if I may say, it seems Mr. Vogel doesn't show much concern for his great-granddaughter. That's because Miss Jasna doesn't carry the Vogel family blood. She only lived with the Old Master for a few weeks. Hain, who appeared as aged as his voice suggested, leaned forward, a trace of sadness coloring his words. The Old Master's son perished during the war, and at that time, his grandson had just been born. Wait, Atticus interrupted Hain's tale. Which side was he fighting for? Hain remained silent for a long moment, then bowed slightly toward Atticus. The gesture spoke volumes. Atticus refrained from passing judgment, merely urging, "Go on." Many lives were lost in that prolonged war, Yet even after it ended, the hatred lingered, festering. The old master's grandson, Adam Vogel, was orphaned at a young age. Hatred took root in his heart, nurtured by his lofty dreams, growing into a towering tree. He vowed to avenge his parents and uphold the honor of wizards. The old master hoped he would see reason and release his hatred, but Master Adam was deaf to such pleas. To fulfill his grandiose dreams, after graduating with honors from Durmstrang, he ignored the old master's advice and delved into magic. Instead of settling down, he chose a life of wandering. He seldom returned home, perhaps once every 2 or 3 years, never staying more than 3 days, always alone, Hein recounted with a hint of regret. I once advised Master Adam to abandon his quest and work at the Ministry of Magic. I hoped he would find a noble girl to marry and continue the Vogel lineage. But Master Adam was consumed by his dreams and thirst for revenge until 20 years ago. Hein's eyes widened slightly. By then, the young master was no longer young, yet he suddenly brought back a little girl. "That girl is Jasna Vogel?" Kingsley inquired in a deep voice. The old master and I were overjoyed. We thought young Master Adam had secretly started a family. However, he informed us that Jasna was not his heir, but the child of a friend. He explained that Miss Jasna's parents and ancestors had sacrificed for that dream, so he changed her name and decided to adopt her. Atticus's brows knitted tightly, sensing something amiss, yet he remained composed, listening intently. Despite the disappointment, the old master and I were still pleased. I believed Master Adam would finally settle down with Miss Jasna, spending more time with the old master. Since the mistress's passing, the old master had endured years of solitude. The delicate white fluff on Hein's body swayed gently in the river breeze. He blew his nose heavily, his large, tennis ball-like eyes glistening with moisture, as if mourning his master's lonely twilight years. It was the first time the young master stayed home for such an extended period since his graduation. Both the old master and I thought he had decided to remain. The old master even planned to send Miss Jasna to Durmstrang for her magical education when she turned 11. However, a few weeks later, Master Adam abruptly announced he was leaving. Atticus Blaine spoke with Miss Jasina. He explained that Miss Jasina's biological parents and ancestors had died defending the rights and honor of wizards. Therefore, she should inherit their legacy and join the battle. He insisted that Miss Jasina did not need to attend Durmstrang, as he was far more knowledgeable than the teachers there and would personally teach her magic. As Louise listened to the description of this species called elves in the magical world, even her anger at the old man sunbathing in the backyard softened into a touch of pity. "What crazy dream is this fool named Adam Pugh pursuing?" Louise couldn't help but ask. "Please be respectful to Master Adam, ma'am." Hein, who had been lost in sadness moments before, suddenly shouted. It glared at Louise angrily, its voice sharp and high-pitched. "Although Master Adam has broken the old master's heart, he is still a descendant of the noble Vogel family. Hein will never allow him to be insulted by a muggle." Hein's sudden reaction shocked Louise, but as she regained her composure, she frowned and retorted angrily. "Oh, you are simply unreasonable, little one. Didn't you hear that I was speaking for your old master?" Atticus raised his hand, interrupting the argument between Louise and Hein, and asked in a deep voice, "What happened next, Hein?" Hein's breathing was still rapid, and it glared at Louise with a look full of disgust. However, under the authority of Atticus Blaine, it did not dare to resist, and Kingsley, on the other side, held back his anger at the elf-like Louise. "Hein has never seen the old master so angry," Hein said, the folds of skin on its face trembling. He even pulled out his wand and threatened Master Adam. If he dared to leave, he would completely sever ties with him and send him to Eccles Tower. "What's Eccles Tower?" Louise frowned and asked, not wanting to pay attention to the house elf named Hein anymore. She stared at Atticus's profile and asked, "A wizarding prison," Atticus replied casually. "Did they do it?" No, Master Adam did not pull out his wand. He just stood at the door with his suitcase and looked at the old master with a smile. He said that he must do this, no matter the cost, no matter how many people would die. He did not give a damn. Louise's lips twitched. Her question had not been answered before. The old master was so angry that he wanted to use magic to trap Master Adam, Hein said in a sad tone. But Miss Jacina stood up at this time. She was only 7 years old, but she stood by Master Adam and told the old master in a firm tone that she wanted to be with Master Adam and continue the struggle of her ancestors. Recalling the scene, Haynes sobbed softly. The old master's heart was broken. He fell to the ground in anger, but Master Adam ignored him and left the house with Miss Jacina. The story ended there. Haynes told them that since then, Adam had never brought Jacina back to this house, and they had not seen each other for many years. The three people by the riverside fell into silence. Louise and Kingsley's eyes fell on Atticus, waiting for his decision. Jacina Vogel. Atticus's fists were tightly clenched behind his back as he stood tall by the river. He looked at the wheat fields stretching to the sky with an expressionless face. After a long time, he asked in a low voice, "What was her original surname, Rosier?" Haynes' eyes widened in slight surprise, but then it remembered that Atticus Blaine was investigating Miss Jacina. Perhaps he had learned about it from his investigation, so it nodded slowly. After receiving Haynes' confirmation, Atticus twitched the corners of his mouth and tightened his fists behind his back. Respectfully, Mr. Blaine, Haynes hesitated, looking at the most prominent figure among wizards in the current era. In the enchanting realm of European magic, a voice broke the silence. "Please forgive Haynes for any rudeness," the speaker implored, their tone both respectful and earnest. "Might Haynes request something of Mr. Blaine?" End of this chapter. Chapter 791. It's time to end. What do you wish to ask, Haynes? Atticus Blaine inquired calmly, his gaze fixed on Vogel's elf. Haynes, visibly distressed, faced Atticus and bowed deeply. Its breath was uneven, and its voice trembled with desperation. "Master Adam and Miss Jasna may have violated wizarding laws. It's a grave offense, but for the sake of the old master, could you allow them to see him before they are sent to prison? You are clever, Haynes, and remarkably loyal," Atticus remarked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. He had anticipated that the elf would plead for Adam Vogel and Jasna Vogel's forgiveness, a request that was impossible to grant. Prison was the most lenient outcome they could hope for. Any resistance might lead to their immediate demise. Even without considering Hermione, their other transgressions were severe enough to warrant such an end. Yet, Haynes did not ask for clemency. It understood the gravity of their crimes and sought only to preserve their lives. Atticus fell silent, pondering longer than expected. The breeze swept across the wilderness, causing the golden wheat to sway rhythmically. Anton Vogel's reputation meant little to him. His thoughts delved into deeper matters. He had initially believed Jasna Rosier to be an alias, assuming Vogel was the true surname of the enigmatic woman he had seen in the elf's memory. To his surprise, the truth was the opposite. Haynes revealed that Jasna was indeed a direct descendant of Anton Vogel, brought back from afar. Adam had also shared that Jasna's ancestors had perished defending the honor of wizards in war. This revelation intrigued Atticus. Rosier, a name belonging to one of the 28 sacred families, a lineage known for its involvement in the war that engulfed Europe half a century ago. As a student at Hogwarts, Atticus had delved into that era's history to learn more about Dumbledore. Only one name came to mind, Vita Rosier. She had been a prominent leader among the fervent Wiccan factions, revered for her status. Historical accounts stated that she perished in battle against Vicencia Santos, the leader of the Wizard Coalition under the International Federation of Wizards. Reflecting on Vita Rosier's life, Atticus's lips tightened unconsciously. "I'll give them a chance, Haynes," he finally declared in a deep voice. "But whether they seize it is up to them." The silence by the riverside lingered. Kingsley and Louise exchanged astonished glances, unable to fathom Atticus's thoughts. If he had been unwilling to grant leniency, he could have easily dismissed Haynes' plea. After all, the entreaty of a humble house elf held little sway, and Atticus could have ignored it entirely. Moreover, Anton Vogel, despite being a former president who had retired over 50 years ago, held little influence over Atticus Blaine. Notably, the request did not originate from Anton Vogel himself. After a prolonged pause, Atticus spoke softly. "If they acknowledge their wrongdoings and confess their crimes, I will allow them to meet Mr. Vogel before they are sent to Azkaban." Azkaban. Haynes began to express gratitude, but was taken aback upon hearing the name of the infamous prison dreaded throughout the European wizarding world. "Mr. Blaine," Hayne stammered. "Shouldn't it be Oxstar?" Atticus chuckled, a mysterious glint in his eyes. His words left Hayne, Kingsley, and Louise bewildered. "Certainly Azkaban, where I believe they will reflect more deeply on their mistakes and play a bigger role." A bigger role? What greater role could a criminal destined for a lifetime in Azkaban play? If this outcome can be achieved, Master Adam and Miss Jasna will not be directly killed by Atticus Blaine. This is already the limit, and Hayne knows he can't do more. He bowed to Atticus, then slowly straightened up, slipping his slender, thin fingers into his clean apron, as if searching for something. After a moment, under the watchful eyes of several people, Hayne produced a pocket watch from beneath his apron. This gold pocket watch was retro in style, yet exquisitely crafted. With a slender golden chain, its thick golden cover was inlaid with a circle of pure diamonds, and the cover was adorned with the Vogel family crest, embellished with gems of various colors. Hayne popped open the protective cover. The dial was made of rare mithril, devoid of hands, with only a few golden stars moving across it. Atticus knew that watches of this design had been used in magic and had been popular in the magical world for some time. There was no doubt that this gold pocket watch was valuable, but even Louise knew that Hayne had not taken it out to bribe Atticus. The key lay in the photo inlaid behind the cover of the pocket watch. It was a picture of Anton Vogel and Jacina Rosier. What? Despite her dissatisfaction with the elf, Louise leaned in and made a surprised sound. The two faces in the photo were close together, both smiling happily. This wasn't the point. The point was that Hayne had clearly stated before that Adam and Jacina hadn't been home for 20 years, yet Vogel in the photo looked exactly like the Vogel they had just seen in the backyard, and Jasna was not a little girl, but a woman in her 20s with slightly cold eyebrows. This pocket watch is the work of goblins. It was given to the old master by the goblins to please him when he was still the Minister of Magic, Hayne explained, rubbing the frame of the gold pocket watch with his fingers. The old master used to cherish this pocket watch. He always carried it. This pocket watch has magical properties. With the photo embedded in it, it can show the current appearance of the wizard in the photo. "So amazing!" Louise exclaimed, noticing that the people in the photo were not static, but could actually move. There was no doubt that this was also a kind of magic. Louise looked at the photo with envy. For reporters, this magic was incredibly enticing. After Master Adam brought Miss Jacina back, they left this photo. The old master gave the pocket watch to Miss Jacina, but when Miss Jasna left, she left the pocket watch in the room. Hayne was worried that his old master would be hurt, so he secretly hid the pocket watch. Hayne held the pocket watch and slowly raised it to Atticus, his eyes filled with hope. "Mr. Blaine, if you see Miss Jacina, can you return this pocket watch to her?" "You worked really hard to save their lives, Hayne." Atticus took the pocket watch, rubbed its edge a few times with his fingertips, glanced at it twice, and then slipped it into his pocket. "As an elf of the Vogel family, you should be able to find the two of them at any time, right?" Hayne nodded slowly. "Yes, Mr. Blaine. Hayne knows where they are, but the old master warned Hayne before and did not allow Hayne to see them, so Hayne can only tell you the location." Hayne provided two addresses. Of these two people, Jasna was in Berlin, where they had been before, and Adam Vogel was currently in a Muggle town in Austria. "Who should we go to first?" Louise asked. "It seems to me that Adam is the one who planned all this. We'd better go find him first." "No," Atticus shook his head. "Let's go see this Miss Rosier first. It's time for this to end." Chapter 792, Judgment Moment. The smog that had blanketed the sky over Berlin finally dissipated under the full light of day. As the sky cleared, the sun began its descent in the southwest, casting a blood-red hue over the vast stratus clouds on the horizon. A crimson curtain draped over the mountains, creating a dramatic backdrop. On the lush green grass, numerous students sat scattered, savoring the rare leisure between the end of classes and the onset of dinner. Groups of young people, gathered in twos and threes, erupted into cheerful laughter, their joy infectious. Louise stood at the edge of the lawn, her fists clenched at her sides. Her delicate face flickered with a mix of sadness and anger, occasionally giving way to worry. After a long pause, she turned to Atticus Blaine, who stood behind her, patiently waiting for her to express her emotions. "Do you think there's a magic club here like the one Fraser was involved in?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. They were at a world-renowned university in Berlin. According to the information provided by Hein, Jasna had been working at this institution for quite some time. It seemed absurd that a wizard would work at a Muggle university for so long, yet it was not entirely unexpected for Atticus and his team. Based on their experiences in Italy, they knew that this organization, which adhered to certain principles and acted on legacies that should have been long buried, was not entirely dismissive of Muggle wisdom. The university was a hub for young minds, brimming with vitality and intelligence. Although these students were unaware of magic, perhaps one of their brilliant ideas could indeed solve some problems. Louise gazed at the students with a heavy heart, wondering if any of them were enduring the same tragedy that Fraser had faced. "Mr. Blaine," Kingsley interjected, not sharing Louise's melancholy. He surveyed the throngs of Muggle students passing by, some casting curious glances their way. His unease was palpable. "This environment isn't favorable for us, Mr. Blaine. There are too many Muggles. If we encounter fierce resistance, it will be challenging to ensure their safety. Moreover, we're in Berlin, and the German Ministry of Magic is nearby. Any magical disturbance will bring the Aurors here swiftly." "This matter is nearing its conclusion, Kingsley," Atticus replied calmly. "I'm not overly concerned about being discovered by the German Ministry of Magic. However, you're right, we should be cautious not to draw too much attention." The slight chill in Atticus's tone and Kingsley's tense demeanor heightened Louise's anxiety. She realized the gravity of what they were about to witness. She also understood that if the wizarding world were exposed to the public, it would cause a seismic shift globally. While she believed people had the right to know the truth about the existence of privileged individuals with magic, she acknowledged that such revelations needed to be handled gradually. Furthermore, the wizard's secrecy law strictly governed wizard behavior. If the wizarding world were exposed, Atticus and Kingsley would face severe repercussions. She didn't want them to pay a steep price because of Fraser's situation. "Let me see," Atticus said, scanning the surroundings. In the distance, a row of weeping willows lined the campus, reminiscent of those by the Black Lake. An oval lake connected to rolling mountains lay beyond the campus. The slopes near the mountains were gentle, dotted with sparse spruce trees. The trees on the gentle slopes were draped in a lush carpet of green grass. As the landscape stretched into the distance, the vegetation thickened, eventually forming a dense, vibrant forest. At this moment, the setting sun was retreating, and a misty, cold haze lingered at the edge of the dark green forest, poised to envelop the bright world. Young people on the hillside admired the sunset, returning hand in hand. Atticus Blaine nodded slightly, thinking it was a beautiful place, an excellent spot for reflection. Turning his head, Atticus's gaze swept over the young students rising from the lawn, preparing to head to dinner or return to their dormitories. His eyes soon settled on a girl with a ponytail, sitting cross-legged on the grass. She had a copy of Summa Theologia by Italian theologian and philosopher Thomas Aquinas resting on her knees and was chatting animatedly with her friends. "Wait for me here," Atticus said, leaving Louise and Kingsley as he stepped onto the lawn toward the girl. No matter where you are, an impressive appearance always draws attention. With his handsome features and a calm yet unassuming demeanor, Atticus had already caught the eye of many. If it weren't for Louise and the formidable-looking Kingsley beside him, he might have been approached by numerous admirers. As Atticus left the two, he became a focal point, drawing the attention of nearby girls like a magnet. When he reached the girl, they had been waiting for him for some time. "I hope I'm not interrupting your conversation," Atticus said gently, smiling. "Oh." The two girls were momentarily stunned, then sprang up from the grass, seemingly unable to believe that such a handsome man had approached them. "No," the girl holding the book exclaimed in a high-pitched voice. "Well, actually, we were just about finished talking." "That's good," Atticus replied softly, extending his hand to the girl with the ponytail. "I'm Fraser Adair." "Tina," the girl responded nervously, casting a quick glance at Louise on the edge of the lawn, her eyes momentarily confused before she continued. I'm Tina Bull, but you can call me Tina. Nice to meet you, Tina, Atticus said, suppressing a smile. Actually, Tina, I've been asked to deliver something to Professor Josna Rosier from the seminary. But as you can see, he shrugged slightly, feigning distress, it's my first time here, and I'm not particularly familiar with the place. So, you see... Oh, no problem. I can take you to find her. She should be dining in the faculty canteen right now, Tina offered quickly, without hesitation. That's wonderful, but... Atticus nodded happily, then hesitated. I plan to surprise Professor Rosier. Could you please deliver this to her and let her know I'm waiting on that hillside? Atticus pointed across the lake, requesting politely. The pocket watch that Hayne had asked him to deliver appeared in Atticus's palm, and he looked at Tina eagerly. Even as an inexperienced student, even as a muggle, Tina could see that the pocket watch was valuable. It was a gold pocket watch, seemingly an antique. Her hesitation was understandable. If the pocket watch were lost, she couldn't afford to replace it. Atticus retracted his hand, and a copper nut twisted and transformed in his palm, becoming a delicate Ouroboros-shaped bracelet. After a faint light shimmered on the copper ring, Atticus handed it to Tina. This is my thank you gift, he said. It might bring you luck, Atticus Blaine suggested with a hint of mystery. Let's head over there and wait for them. He gestured towards the lake as he rejoined Kingsley and Louise. Them? Louise questioned, picking up on the slip in Atticus's words. Atticus glanced around the campus, where buildings of various architectural styles stood proudly. He smiled and replied, It seems to me she might not be the only one arriving later. Is the Muggle girl in danger? Kingsley asked quietly, watching as the Muggle girl hurried to hand Josna the pocket watch. I've already taken precautions, Atticus assured him, pausing thoughtfully before continuing. But if Josna Rosier makes the wrong choice, then all I can say is, I'm sorry. Please remember to vote at the beginning of the month. End of this chapter. Chapter 793, Judgment Moment 2. Behind the ancient Greek-style exhibition hall stood a two-story red brick building. During dinner, college professors flowed in and out continuously. Josna Rosier sat alone at a dining table by the window, her eyes fixed on the newspaper in her hand. A gentle mist rose from the cup of coffee before her. Many familiar faces passed by, yet none stopped to greet Professor Rosier. Known for her vast knowledge, youth, and striking appearance, she was also recognized for her cold and eccentric demeanor. She rarely engaged with her colleagues, preferring the company of the school's service staff, who maintained the campus and assisted students and professors. As the last rays of the setting sun vanished behind the mountains, the warm glow from the small building became prominent against the darkening campus. Josna glanced one last time at the Daily Prophet, tucked inside the Berlin Daily News. She folded the newspapers and placed them on the table, then picked up her coffee, stirring it slowly with a thin spoon. Her gaze drifted to the cold, distant forest outside the window, ensuring her Muggle colleagues in the restaurant saw no hint of doubt in her indifferent eyes. Nothing had happened. More than a week had passed since news from Hogsmeade confirmed that Hermione Granger had received the package. Yet, for a week, there was silence. Both Hogwarts and the British Ministry of Magic remained uncomfortably quiet, as if they had no intention of pursuing the matter. This was, of course, impossible. Aeschylus had informed her that the small trap, crafted from a Muggle corpse, had been triggered, indicating that the British Ministry of Magic or Hogwarts was aware of their presence. But everything remained calm, and the anticipated border lockdown and vigorous pursuit did not occur. Josna sighed softly, her straight, delicate shoulders drooping slightly. She still didn't understand why they had embarked on such a risky plan, risking the wrath of Albus Dumbledore and Atticus Blaine, hoping they would seek justice for their students in the European wizarding world. A massive killing spree to confuse the situation and trigger a new round of conflict seemed unrealistic. Perhaps it was possible to kill the boy who lived at Hogwarts, but even that was fraught with danger. Despite their careful dealings with the goblins, the risks were significant. However, Mr. Rahman's wisdom was absolute. He believed this course of action would benefit their cause, so the outcome must align with his vision. Yet, she couldn't comprehend it with her limited understanding. As she sipped the coffee from the golden spoon, Jasna frowned. It was too bitter. She had forgotten to add sugar. Professor Rosier? The worries in her heart and the noisy muggles around her made Jasna feel increasingly restless. She was ready to roll up the newspaper and leave the smoky environment when a female student appeared at the top of the stairs. After scanning the room, the student quickly approached her. Listening to the girl's account and examining the gold pocket watch handed to her, doubt flickered across Jasna's cold face. She unconsciously pursed her bright red lips. This pocket watch, yes, she recognized it. It belonged to a young man named Fraser Onder. Jasna's heart began to race. What does that mean? What did the man look like, Bull? Jasna asked, rising slowly with a stern expression. She didn't notice that the hand holding the newspaper was trembling slightly. Tina took a step back, intimidated by Professor Rosier's serious demeanor. She had assumed that the handsome man and Professor Rosier were close friends and expected the professor to be pleased upon seeing the pocket watch. He's handsome, Tina replied instinctively. His hair is gray, and his eyes are a wonderful lavender color. He looks quite remarkable. Observing Professor Rosier's face turn completely sinister, Tina, now frightened, shrank back and asked timidly, "Isn't that man a friend of yours, Professor?" As night fell, the bright moon, partially obscure, by clouds, took on an eerie red hue. On the gentle slope by the lake, Atticus Blaine sat casually on a stone protruding from the lawn. His hands rested on his knees, and his wand swayed gently in the breeze. The chill emanating from the deep, foreboding forest made Louise instinctively wrap her goose-yellow coat tightly around herself. Despite the cold, her attention was fixed on Atticus, who appeared relaxed and at ease. A flicker of unease crossed her eyes. "Atticus?" Louise called softly. Atticus responded with a nasal tone. "Do we need it?" Louise glanced at Kingsley, who was waving his wand further away, then looked at Atticus's slightly thin back, nervously biting her lip. "Should we?" She hesitated. "I mean, if there are a lot of them." "The enchantment is complete, Mr. Blaine," Kingsley announced, suddenly appearing beside them. "All nearby muggles have been expelled. If there's a battle later, the muggles won't see anything." "Good job, Kingsley," Atticus said, his deep gaze fixed on the illuminated buildings across the lake. The smile he gave sent a shiver down Louise's spine. The moonlight dimmed, and a cold mist gradually descended from the dense jungle, spreading to the lake shore, leaving only the clear area where Atticus and the others stood. The breeze disturbed the smoke, forming various strange shapes, and combined with the sharp cries from the dark forest, the once sunny lakeside now felt ghostly and eerie. A thin wisp of white smoke silently emerged from the fog wall, like a slender tentacle creeping along the grass towards the trio on the hillside. Sly, on guard, scanned the surroundings, lurking in the darkness. When Kingsley looked away, it continued to flow through the cold air, inching closer. Finally, the white tentacle was less than 10 feet away. It raised its head slightly, choosing its target. The tall, dark-skinned wizard seemed too wary to be a good target, but Atticus appeared defenseless. Yet, no one believed Atticus Blaine was there merely by chance. His reputation, bolstered by Dumbledore's encouragement, made attacking him seem unwise. A Muggle woman? Though her presence with the two wizards was puzzling, she was undoubtedly powerless to resist. After a brief hesitation, the tentacle resumed its approach, patient and stealthy. When Kingsley glanced back at the hillside, it remained motionless in the grass for 10 minutes, almost invisible. 10 feet, 9 feet, 3 feet, 1 foot, until 1 inch. The white smoke tentacle no longer concealed itself, revealing its ferocious claws. It suddenly lunged, aiming to strike the unsuspecting Louise's calf. If it could touch her, this Muggle woman would fall into their grasp. "Stab it," Atticus Blaine commanded, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The sharp crackle that followed was reminiscent of gunpowder igniting, and it was immediately succeeded by a chorus of agonized wails. The sudden commotion jolted Louise and Kingsley from their thoughts. They spun around, eyes wide with shock, to discover a line of fire hovering ominously behind them. This fiery line extended deep into the fog wall, hundreds of feet away, and beyond the white mist, a vague silhouette, resembling a human torch with teeth and claws, loomed menacingly. Cold sweat trickled down Kingsley's forehead as he realized how narrowly they had escaped an attack. Atticus finally rose to his feet, turning slowly to face the fog wall. A cold smile played on his lips as he spoke. "Isn't it customary to introduce oneself first?" A tense silence followed his words, broken only by a series of loud bangs. From the shadows, a figure emerged, stepping into the dim light. Atticus surveyed the tense faces before him, dismissing the wands pointed in his direction. His gaze settled on a tall, striking woman at the center of the group. His voice softened with a hint of nostalgia. "At last we meet, Professor Rosier." Jasna's expression was icy, her golden pocket watch slipping from her open palm, the chain still looped around her finger. "Where did you get—" "Is Atticus Blaine," she demanded, her voice as cold as her demeanor. End of this chapter. Chapter 794, Judgment Moment 3. The wind by the lake carried a sudden, fishy scent, and the red moon reflected in the rippling water seemed to rise with a bloody hue. Louise had seen gun battles in movies, where two groups fought with submachine guns. She had even witnessed ordinary people fall to gunfire in real life. Now, she found herself as the protagonist in such a scene, with a dozen wands aimed at her, Atticus Blaine and Kingsley. Compared to the ominous black hole of a gun barrel, being threatened by a small wooden stick seemed almost comical. However, these were no ordinary sticks. They were magic wands, each capable of incredible feats. The cold eyes and murderous intent on the faces of those wielding them were far from amusing. Unconsciously, Louise began to tremble, staggering backward. "There will be no danger." Atticus turned to her with a humorous tone. "If you're scared, you can close your eyes and cover your ears." "I'm not a coward," Louise retorted, though Atticus's playful comment did ease her fear somewhat. She took a deep breath and surveyed the diverse group of people before her. Her gaze finally settled on a tall woman, either Angus Aeschylus or another, one of whom had killed her brother. Atticus ignored Jacina's question, glancing at the stern and shy group with a hint of disappointment. "Are these the only ones?" he asked. "How much do you know about us, Blaine?" Jacina's eyes flashed with anger when she received no response. She held her composure and asked coldly. "In my opinion," Atticus replied calmly, "why don't you put down your wand, come back to London with me and confess your crimes?" "Do it." Jacina's response was swift, showing she had no intention of further dialogue with Blaine. Boom! Suddenly, a burst of brilliant fireworks exploded before Louise's eyes, lighting up the lakeside as if it were day. The powerful magic in the curse surged like a roaring sea, shaking the very space around them. Every inch of air within Louise's view trembled. The dense, cursed light, like raindrops, swept across the earth, stripping the green lawn to reveal the black soil beneath. The riotous magic ionized the air, and waves of blue and white thunder accompanied the cursed light. Kingsley's expression shifted. The magic barrier he had set up to conceal their presence was shattered by the onslaught of powerful spells. Louise's scream was lost in the simultaneous roar. Behind them, several more wizards emerged from the willow trees by the lake. They raised their wands high, conjuring ferocious flames that turned into fire dragons and poison-horned beasts, Zu-Wu, which circled and swooped down. In this tempest of magic, Atticus, Kingsley, and Louise seemed fragile, as if a single wave could erase them. Kingsley's dark skin turned pale. He couldn't counter such a powerful attack, and looked to Atticus for help. He was bewildered by the strength of their attackers, each a formidable presence in the European magical world. How could there be so many powerful wizards? But there was no time for such thoughts. Survival was paramount, yet Atticus remained unfazed. As the sea of fire and spells threatened to engulf them, he didn't even raise his wand. The troubling thing was that Atticus Blaine appeared scared. His expression was slightly bewildered, as if he were lost in another world. Yet in his eyes, reflecting the bright firelight, something seemed to be brewing. "No way, no money," Kingsley thought, gritting his teeth. This idea suddenly struck him. He raised his wand, ready to face the incoming attack alone, but the wave of curses approached within 20 feet of where the three stood. Kingsley's wand, poised to cast a protective spell, had not yet formed a shield when the curse lights suddenly vanished. They disappeared entirely, as if swallowed by an invisible black hole. Before Kingsley could comprehend what was happening, the fire dragon above them unfurled its massive wings, more than 10 feet wide, and swooped down. The intense heat brushed against Kingsley's cheek. Then, The oppressive sensation vanished. The fire dragon and all the malevolent curses that followed it disappeared, leaving the sky solemnly clear. A rumble, like an earthquake, continued as the figures of Atticus and his companions were obscured by dreamlike light and shadow. Jasna couldn't see clearly, but she and her forces didn't relent. The tide of spells continued to surge toward Atticus, peeling away layers of soil. Louise stopped screaming, unable to comprehend the situation, but she knew that Atticus had attacked Kingsley and seemingly done nothing. Kingsley stared at Atticus with a horrified expression. Within a 20-foot radius around Atticus, there seemed to be a void of magical power. The rules of magic appeared altered, preventing any spells from forming an attack. The relentless assault lasted for 2 minutes, and the high-frequency spellcasting left Jasna's forces exhausted. Their arms dropped, and they panted as they gazed at the dissipating smoke. Their faces, once filled with ferocious pleasure, fell as the dust settled and their vision cleared, leaving them frozen in disbelief. Impossible, Jasna mouthed silently. The surrounding earth had been churned repeatedly by the curses. From the lakeshore to the rock, the intense heat had even melted the soil into crystals. Yet the area near the rock where Atticus stood remained untouched, the grass lush and green, without a hint of damage. As for Atticus and his companions, they were unscathed. The breeze carried away the tension in the air, but it couldn't erase the shock on the faces of Jasna and her commanders. Impossible, someone murmured again, sending a green curse light toward Atticus in disbelief. This time, Atticus finally reacted. The bewildered look vanished, and his eyes regained their depth. He raised his wand and deflected the curse light. Failed, Atticus muttered, frowning as if trying something new. He shook his head slightly, dispelling the displeasure of failure, and looked calmly at Jasna's group. "Who is Angus Aeschylus?" he asked. Jasna's expression shifted slightly, and she pursed her lips while her forces stared blankly at Atticus. "No?" Atticus shook his head. Suddenly, without warning, golden flames ignited Jasna's subordinates. First, their clothes disintegrated in the flames, followed by their flesh and blood. Finally, only their skeletons remained, struggling and wailing in the fire, until their souls departed and the skeletons turned to ash. In the warm spring breeze, they were like burning candles. End of this chapter. Chapter 795, Judgment Moment. Under the somber night sky, on the hillside by the lake, a grim scene unfolded. Like candles being lit one by one, Atticus Blaine's actions ignited Jasna's subordinates. Their souls served as wicks, their flesh and blood as the wax, sacrificing their lives to the macabre dance of light and shadow. The skeletal remains, with gaping mouths and hollow eye sockets spewing fire, howled like banshees. Louise, pale and drained of blood, stared at them in shock. Overwhelmed, she finally succumbed, collapsing to her knees and retching. Anton Vogel's granddaughter, in a moment of clarity, attempted to intervene. She slashed her wand at the nearest subordinate, hoping to save him. Yet the gentle breeze from her wand was powerless against Atticus's fierce flames, unable to even make them flicker. "Stop it, Blaine," Jasna shouted, her voice trembling with anger, her cold cheeks glistening with sweat. "Did those muggles who died at your hands plead for mercy like this?" Atticus asked calmly. "Muggles?" Jasna's body shook with rage, her eyes burning with hatred. "Those soulless animals are not worthy of comparison to noble wizards." "In my eyes, Professor Rosier, you are no different from cattle," Atticus replied, his tone steady and unyielding. The golden flames enveloping the wailing skeletons surged, casting pillars of fire into the night sky. The roar of the inferno drowned out all terror. When the flames finally subsided, only charred embers floated in the air. "Make a choice, Professor Rosier," Atticus said, his demeanor unchanged, devoid of hatred or joy. "You can continue to resist and die here, or come with me to England, confess your deeds, and spend the rest of your life in Azkaban. If you're fortunate, you might even be released early." Before Jasna could respond, a series of loud bangs echoed from the distance. Under the dim night, a large group of wizards appeared, clad in standard black trench coats. They charged forward, shouting fiercely and sending threatening sparks into the sky. "It's the German Ministry of Magic, Mr. Blaine," Kingsley exclaimed, sweat beading on his forehead, his face pale. "Your magic broke through the barrier I set up, and they've discovered us." "There's no need to worry, Kingsley," Atticus replied, casting a brief glance at the approaching ministry officials. Now that we've found the true culprit, it's time to inform the authorities. He then turned to Yasna with a slightly sad smile. Have you made your decision, Professor Rosier? Yasna, oblivious to the exchange between Atticus and Kingsley, saw the German Ministry of Magic closing in. She spoke bitterly. You've exceeded our expectations, Blaine, but don't think you're invincible. If that person decides to act, your fate will mirror those you've just slain. Atticus raised an eyebrow. We won't let you escape, Atticus Blaine, Yasna declared, glancing at the scorched earth beside her. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Blaine's, as if trying to etch his image into her memory. Then, in an instant, she vanished into thin air. She escaped! Louise, finally recovering from her nausea, stood up, witnessing Yasna Rosier's disappearance. Atticus Blaine vanished using the wizarding technique known as apparition, right before her eyes. This is exactly what I wanted to see, he remarked with a smile, turning to Kingsley. You stay here and explain everything to the German Ministry of Magic, Kingsley. I'll take Louise and continue the pursuit. Be careful, Mr. Blaine. Kingsley hesitated for a moment before nodding. He recalled the woman's shout before she disappeared and gave his instructions with a solemn air. Atticus nodded in agreement and swiftly led Louise away before the attackers could seal off the area. A flash of red light struck Kingsley, causing his wand to spin through the air before landing in the grass. Amidst the ensuing chaos and screams, Kingsley set aside his concerns for Atticus, took a deep breath, and declared, Hey, don't be nervous, everyone. I'm Kingsley Shack, Lebolt from the Auror office of the British Ministry of Magic, and I can explain everything. Sachsenhausen concentration camp, located in Oranienburg, north of Berlin, Germany, spans 400 hectares. It served as the headquarters for all German-occupied concentration camps during the Muggle World War II, established by notorious Muggle war criminals. However, times have changed, and this former hell has become a well-known tourist attraction. As the last security team ensured no tourists were left behind, darkness enveloped the area. The moonlight was thick, casting an eerie glow over the tall walls, desolate playground, old office buildings, and fan-shaped dormitories. The wind howled like a ghostly wail. In a remote part of the concentration camp, tall poplar trees cast ghostly shadows on the ground. A dome-shaped watchtower stood under their shadow, its cement walls riddled with bullet holes, scattered like dark brown spots. The watchtower and nearby ruins were deemed dangerous, and Muggles managing the site had cordoned off the area to prevent entry. With a flash of silver light, Yasna Rosier staggered out of the void. She took a few quick breaths, adjusting to the new environment's light. Several wizards emerged from the shadows of the trees surrounding her. Despite her appearance, these guardian wizards did not fully trust Yasna and subjected her to a series of checks, including passwords. Although anxious, Yasna understood the necessity of this process. Once her identity was confirmed and the wizards' expressions softened, she ignored their greetings and hurried towards the watchtower, now a dangerous structure. Standing before the crumbling wall, Yasna focused on a stone brick mostly covered in moss. The brick's surface bore an engraving of a triangle encircling a circle, bisected by vertical lines. Yasna raised her wand and tapped the brick. The line within the dusty triangle glowed with a silver halo, spreading upwards until it reached the lower edge of the square lookout above. The wall rippled like water. Yasna reached into the wall, pulling a silver thread. The high lookout quickly sank to the ground, expanding into a door shrouded in a silver light film as it descended. Without hesitation, Yasna stepped through the light film, vanishing from the sight of the guarding wizards, who sensed something amiss. The scene darkened abruptly, and when light returned, Yasna found herself in a foyer with a tall vault. The air was thick with the stench of blood and mildew. The shattered cement floor was wet, with water pooling everywhere. Yasna's face was as cold as ice. Without hesitation, she marched through the puddles, her black high-top leather boots splashing water as she made her way toward the dimly lit corridor beyond the foyer. The corridors twisted and turned like a labyrinth, and as she ventured further, faint, eerie wails echoed in her ears. The deeper she went, the more piercing and harsh the cries became, yet Yasna remained unfazed, ignoring them completely. "Good evening, Miss Vogel," A voice interrupted her thoughts. An iron gate loomed ahead, and a guard seated behind a square table had already been alerted to her arrival. He stood up straight and greeted her. "Is Aeschylus at the base?" Jasna inquired, her tone icy. "Ah, Captain Aeschylus is currently engaged in healthcare activities in the laboratory, Miss Vogel," the guard replied, raising an eyebrow and offering her a knowing smile. "If you're looking for him, I suggest you wait a moment." End of this chapter. Chapter 796, Judgment Moment 5. Beyond the Iron Gate lay a vast room, as expansive as the Great Hall of Hogwarts, yet with a ceiling that soared even higher. Much like the reception hall of the British Ministry of Magic, a row of fireplaces lined one side of the room. Most of these fireplaces were dim, but occasionally a flash of green fire would illuminate the space as someone hurriedly stepped out. On the opposite wall, multiple elevators were installed, leading to a series of densely packed doorways above, each opening to unknown destinations. The front wall was adorned with a massive relief, depicting a magnificent castle encircled by a sun-like ring. This underground fortress, hidden from the world, was finally bustling with activity. "Long time no see, Miss Vogel," remarked a man who had just emerged from a fireplace. He joined Jasna in an elevator, his surprise evident as the doors closed. "Are you here to see Mr. Rahman too?" "As far as I know, Mr. Rahman is not in the hive," Jasna replied, sidestepping the question. Instead, she inquired, "How's the progress of establishing your branch there, Burker?" "It hasn't been particularly smooth," the middle-aged man with a prominent nose admitted. "Those vampires live in the Muggle world and are indifferent to the affairs of wizards. Frankly, I don't agree with Mr. Lahmann's idea of recruiting them. These scum aren't worthy of being our compatriots. I've returned in hopes of persuading Mr. Rahman." "You know, Burke, Mr. Rahman's decisions are not easily swayed," Jasna noted, as the elevator came to a halt. She swiftly exited, leaving her words hanging in the air. The corridor she entered was another maze-like passage, lined with numerous wooden doors. Most were shrouded in darkness, but from a few, strange noises could be heard. Familiar with the path, Jasna found a room with a green-painted door, marked by numerous bloody fingerprints. Inside, several people were engaged in conversation. Boom, boom, boom. Jasna knocked on the door, and after a few seconds, a man with gray hair appeared. "Christopher," she greeted, noting the eerie scales on the old wizard's cheeks and the pale green of his vertical pupils. "Your alienation has worsened, Christopher. I doubt you'll make it to Easter." "You don't need to remind me, you little brat. I'm conducting a great experiment," Christopher retorted. Without waiting for his permission, Jasna pushed her way into the room, prompting the old wizard to slam the door in frustration. The room was as large as several classrooms combined. Its walls were inscribed with mysterious runes designed to isolate sound, and most of the space was dominated by a massive, intricate alchemy instrument. A dozen or so people stood at various ports of the device, their expressions filled with anticipation. At the center of the alchemy instrument was a spherical space, encircled by metal tentacles with suction cups. A Muggle girl, suspended by magic, floated in midair, her eyes filled with fear as she gazed at the onlookers. Above her, a mass of black sand hovered, sometimes gathering, sometimes dispersing, like fine grains breathing with the rhythm of ocean waves. Occasionally, a low, hair-raising roar emanated from the sand, accompanied by a pulsing white halo. Jasna's eyes lingered on the black sand. Her lips pursed as she suppressed her anxiety. "Don't cause trouble," she warned, casting a hateful glance at the scene before her. Christopher, who was leading the experiment, lifted his head and looked at Haisha with anticipation in his voice. "You may begin, Aeschylus." A roar, reminiscent of a wild beast on the hunt, echoed through the laboratory as the black sand mist that filled the air suddenly became turbulent. The powerful magic activated the spells on the walls, causing them to light up one by one. The black sand mist began to spin violently, and the Muggle girl beneath it, her body bound, started trembling uncontrollably. Tears streamed down her beautiful yet despairing face. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the room, and the CK fog and sand hovering near the ceiling swooped down, pouring into the girl's nose and ears. As the black sand invaded her, she let out an ear-piercing scream, and her graceful body began to expand visibly. In an instant, she transformed into an oval balloon, her body glowing with an intense radiance. The transparency of her skin and bones became apparent under the light. Click! The alchemy equipment, operated by the experimenter, sprang into action. Suction cups surrounding the girl emitted streams of electric light, distorting the space and compressing the Muggle girl, who was on the verge of exploding. "It's reached its limit," shouted a researcher responsible for monitoring the girl's life, 2 minutes after the black sand had filled her body. As soon as the words were spoken, the black sand, now much lighter in color, spewed out of the girl's body and returned to Aeschylus under Na's watchful gaze. Boom! Although the black sand had left her body, the girl's form did not revert to normal. Some residual magic continued to stretch her body, and fine, menacing black lines appeared on her fair skin, tracing her blood vessels and spreading rapidly. Only the electric light from the suction cup tentacles kept the ominous magic from erupting. "How do you feel, Aeschylus?" asked an old wizard with a scaly face, approaching with excitement. "Ah!" Aeschylus, with his blonde hair and youthful face, raised his arms and exhaled with relief. "It feels good, much more relaxed," he said, turning to the unrecognizable girl suspended in the air, smiling contentedly. "How long can she last?" "We've improved our method, Aeschylus. This Muggle can survive for about 3 months. After that, the dark magic will completely corrupt her and eventually return to your body," the old wizard remarked, a hint of dissatisfaction in his voice. "Muggles' bodies and souls are too weak. If we used wizards, I believe you could enjoy relief for a longer period." "Every wizard is a valuable asset, Christopher," Yasna, who had been observing with a cold demeanor, interjected, her tone warning. "The only wizard you can experiment on is yourself." "Oh, Jasna," Aeschylus replied with a light smile, as if noticing her for the first time. "What brings you here when you're not teaching at your Muggle school? Do you have any interesting tasks?" Jasna didn't respond immediately. She glanced at Christopher, waiting until he cursed and went to inspect the balloon that had fallen onto the test bench before pulling Aeschylus aside. "We've been exposed," Jasna stated bluntly. "Atticus Blaine discovered us." "Wow!" Aeschylus exclaimed, grinning after a moment of surprise. "Where did we slip up?" "I'm not sure, but I suspect he got some information from the goblins," Jasna replied, her face a mix of irritation and confusion. "He suddenly appeared at my Muggle university with Kingsley Shacklebolt and a Muggle woman. He asked a Muggle student to give me a pocket watch. This pocket watch came from—" Yasna pulled a gold pocket watch from her pocket and showed it to Aeschylus, beginning to explain its origin. However, before she could finish, a sudden click, bang! The sound of shattering glass abruptly pierced the low hum of discussion in the laboratory, followed by a sharp cry. Atticus Blaine appeared in the laboratory, holding Louise's arm. Under the astonished gazes of many, Atticus smiled, his eyes scanning each face in turn. His gaze lingered on the massive alchemy machine. When he spotted the balloon lying on the test bench, his smile faded, and his expression grew intense. He stared intently at the unrecognizable Muggle girl, her skin marred with dark lines and wisps of black smoke rising from her body. For a long moment, he remained silent. Finally, Atticus's eyes settled on Jasna Rosier and Angus Aeschylus. The corners of his mouth curled into an icily cold smile. "You all seem to be having a great time," he remarked. End of this chapter. Chapter 797, Judgment Moment 6. The room was eerily silent, save for the faint groans of pain from the disfigured Muggle girl lying on the test table. All eyes were fixed on Atticus Blaine and Amos, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. The blonde girl beside them seemed lost in thought. "Impossible," Jasna murmured, her fingertips trembling. She shook her head slightly, her voice strained and uncertain. "You can't find this place, Blaine. Apparition is not allowed here." "How on earth did you—" Mid-sentence, Jasna's gaze dropped to the gold pocket watch in her palm, realization dawning on her. "You have quick reflexes, Miss Rosier," Atticus remarked gently, "but not very bright." Jasna's lips tightened at his words. She raised her arm, poised to smash the pocket watch to the ground, but before she could act, an unseen force wrenched it from her grasp. The watch landed neatly in Atticus's palm. "This pocket watch contains precious emotions. Ms. Rosier, if you don't want it, you can give it to me. I can find another use for it," Atticus said with a slight smile, tucking the watch into his pocket. Yasna seemed to choke on her words, as if an invisible hand gripped her throat. The oppressive atmosphere in the room made it hard for Louise to breathe. Her hand, which had been supporting Louise's arm, was now tightly clasped in Louise's own. She surveyed the room cautiously, aware that these people were the dregs of the wizarding world, vicious and malevolent. Yet the fear in their eyes as they looked at Atticus gave Louise a newfound appreciation for his title as the most powerful wizard of our time. Her gaze lingered on Atticus's cold profile, admiration shining in her eyes. Unexpectedly, Atticus, the focus of everyone's fearful attention, did not draw his wand to unleash a killing spree. Instead, he approached the test stand, moving towards the Muggle woman who had been reduced to a cocoon. Louise followed closely, unwilling to release Atticus's hand. The cocooned woman lay on the ground, her features unrecognizable, yet the light in her slit-like eyes pleaded not for life, but for death. Atticus traced his fingers along the woman's arm, gathering a trace of black sand. He examined it closely, bringing it to his nose to discern its nature. "Can she still be saved?" Louise asked, her voice tinged with sadness and anger. Though she didn't understand magic, she could reason that this woman's fate was akin to her brother's and Valeria's. "Hopeless," Atticus replied bluntly. "She was parasitized by the power of Obscurus. No wonder she was used as a vessel to seal dark magic and evil thoughts. No wonder you possess such power." With a sigh, Atticus stood and turned his calm gaze to the blond young man beside Jasna. "Were you shaped by natural misfortunes or forced by man-made disasters?" At his words, Angus Aeschylus's expression twisted with rage, black smoke curling from his pale, bloodless face. "Atticus Blaine, what do you think?" "It seems to be the latter, then." Atticus nodded, a flicker of sympathy in his purple eyes, though it vanished quickly. He then looked at Louise. "I am now certain, Louise, that this person is the wizard who killed." "Atticus Blaine, what are you going to do?" "Are you going to kill him?" Louise asked, still dazed and unable to grasp the situation. "What am I?" "The power of magic comes from the heart," Atticus explained. "An Obscurus is a person with magical talents who, as a child, experiences a tragedy that shatters their soul. This trauma breeds dark magic that consumes their vitality and reason. Typically, a wizard who becomes an Obscurus has a limited lifespan, but he—" Atticus gestured towards Aeschylus, whose human form was disintegrating, and continued calmly, "He seems to have found a way to expel the growing dark magic from his body, temporarily transferring it to others. This allows him to suppress the power and extend his life." "Do you think you can leave here alive, Atticus Blaine?" Aeschylus's voice was filled with fury, perhaps provoked by Atticus's mingly casual demeanor, which in reality was as intimidating as a sword of Damocles hanging over them. This pressure ignited Aeschylus's anger, and he roared, "You will pay for your insolence." In an instant, Aeschylus's body transformed into a swirling mass of black sand mist. The black sand expanded rapidly, like a murderer's roar, spinning and crackling against the room's four walls, melting them layer by layer. "No!" cried the old wizard, who had conducted forbidden experiments and turned himself into a half-human, half-ghost. He finally realized the gravity of the situation and looked at Jacina in panic. "We can't let him lose control here. He'll destroy everything." Jacina's eyes flickered with light, but she remained still, observing the unfolding chaos. The black sand roared incessantly, and the high-speed spinning mist whipped up a violent hurricane within the room, obliterating all the furnishings. Yet, Atticus remained focused on the Muggle girl at his feet. Inspired by some unknown force, the dark magic within the girl's body became agitated, and without the suppression of the alchemical instrument, she began to melt away like a candle under the evil magic. The dark power sealed within her quickly merged into the black hurricane. Atticus watched as the Muggle girl's life force faded rapidly, but he did not intervene. The combined power of the black hurricane grew stronger. Even Jacina had to conjure an iron armor spell to withstand the suffocating air, while Louise, the only Muggle in the house, clung to Atticus's arms to keep from collapsing. Suddenly, a wave of black sand surged from the raging hurricane. Like a dragon hovering in the air, it extended its ferocious head, bearing bloody fangs, and lunged towards the ashes left behind by the Muggle girl. Just as the black wave was about to strike, Atticus twisted suddenly, raising his arms with a look of endless indifference in his eyes. He swung his wand down forcefully, as if whipping the air. Boom! A silvery flash cut through the dark room like flying sand and rocks, as if thunder had erupted in the laboratory. The air within the confined space shook violently. Many researchers with mediocre magical abilities rolled their eyes and collapsed, while Jacina's armor barrier shattered, leaving her pale and bleeding from the corners of her mouth. Atticus and Louise, protected within a milky white barrier, were the only ones left standing. The black storm, struck hard, exploded with a piercing scream but quickly reformed. Atticus Blaine, a high-frequency voice echoed, filled with rage and desperation. A scream so piercing it could burst eardrums echoed through the laboratory, accompanied by brilliant flashes of thunder that ionized the air with powerful magic, wreaking havoc on everything within the room. The chaos was palpable. Obscurus was in a state of complete fury, like an unending, boundless sea. A black torrent descended from above, crashing down and obliterating the milky white barrier that surrounded Atticus Blaine and Louise. The clash of two opposing magical forces erupted into a fierce blaze, and the room's temperature soared to unbearable levels. Amidst the roaring black storm, Atticus cast a quick glance at the researchers who had collapsed, unconscious, on the floor. His eyes then settled on Jacina Rosier, who was struggling to maintain her protective iron armor. After a moment of contemplation, Atticus raised his wand and struck the air once more. With a resounding boom, accompanied by deafening roars of agony and silver-green flashes of light that radiated in all directions, the room succumbed to the chaos, collapsing in a cloud of smoke and dust. End of this chapter. Chapter 798, Judgment Moment, 7. In the midst of a sudden earthquake, the laboratory's ceiling collapsed, and the four walls were torn apart by the immense impact. Billowing smoke and dust spread along the narrow corridor, rendering everything in sight hazy and indistinct. Jacina fell to the ground, her face pale, as sharp-edged stones scattered across the floor left blood marks on her once gorgeous face and jade-like arms. "We must escape from here and report to my father." This thought lingered persistently in Jacina's mind. From the moment she saw Atticus Blaine appear, she knew that the situation had reached a critical point beyond repair. The anti-apparition spell that once enveloped this place had been shattered by Atticus's magic. Just as Jacina was about to disapparate and leave the base, where she had invested countless efforts for half a century, a spear wreathed in golden flames suddenly appeared through the smoke, striking the ground at her feet with a resounding clang. Before Jacina could react, the flame spear rapidly transformed, and lines of fire extended from its shaft. In the blink of an eye, a cage of flames encircled her. "Stay there and don't move," came Atticus's cold command from behind the swirling smoke. The scattered black fog, sand and smoke had not yet settled, but the commotion had already drawn attention. Deep underground, the shrill alarm of the howling curse suddenly blared, and people began converging from all directions. Atticus remained calm, surveying the general situation within the base. He raised his wand high, and flames poured from its tip like a golden torrent. With a rumble, the golden fire pillar, under his control, easily penetrated through layers of floors, rock formations, and moist soil, reaching the surface above. The raging flames surged into the sky, transforming into a jaw-dropping giant web that illuminated the night as brightly as day, visible even from Berlin. Simultaneously, another flame separated from the torrent, turning into finer fire threads. These threads did not destroy the massive base, but quietly submerged into the bottom floor, spreading rapidly along the building's surface. They entwined and eventually formed a flame chrysalis surrounding the base. Wizards attempting to use the Flu network were shocked to find it had lost its effectiveness, and the outside world was rushing towards them. Those within the Flu network's magic network suddenly lost their destination coordinates and were abruptly pulled out of the void, thrown aside. "Let's go. Change places," Atticus said. The corridor continued to collapse, making the terrain unsuitable for fighting. He grasped Louise's wrist, waved his staff to disperse the smoke, and their bodies suddenly turned into shadows. In the blink of an eye, they emerged from the corridor and appeared in the hall. Wizards were pouring out of each tunnel on the tall rock wall, with only one entrance spewing smoke. "What's going on? Was there an experimental accident?" The base wizards gathered in the hall were still unaware of the unfolding events. They raised their heads, frowning at the cave entrance from which smoke and ferocious roars emanated, conversing among themselves. The usually solemn and silent base was in rare chaos, so much so that the wizards failed to realize the imminent danger, with Atticus Blaine standing among them. Louise wore a confused expression. The recent events had been overwhelming for her, and Atticus did not attack immediately. Instead, he turned and gazed at the massive relief carved into the front of the hall, depicting a castle. "What? Are you crazy? Atticus Blaine!" A sudden roar of fear and anger echoed through the smoke-filled corridor. It came from the base wizards who had rushed in to assess the situation, heedless of the danger. "Is that madman out of control?" muttered a wizard standing next to Atticus, his voice tinged with disbelief. "No, I have to get out of here." Driven by a sense of impending crisis, the wizard pushed through the crowd toward the fireplace. Upon discovering that it had inexplicably ceased to function, he spat in frustration and hurried toward the hall's exit. A fierce wind arose without warning, accompanied by a roar reminiscent of a fire dragon emanating from the corridor. Thick, gray smoke billowed out, enveloping the hall's ceiling. From within the smoke, Aeschylus transformed into a black sandstorm. This storm was far more formidable than before, its high-speed rotation at the center emitting a red halo that signified rage. "Atticus Blaine!" The black sand vibrated at a high frequency, its roar piercingly sharp. The expressions of the base wizards in the hall shifted dramatically. Atticus Blaine. He was at the base? Some felt terror and panic, while others were coldly furious or eager to confront him upon hearing his name. Hovering in midair, Aeschylus had already spotted Atticus among the crowd. Like an overturned sky, the black torrent, infused with malevolent magic, surged relentlessly toward Atticus. Yet Atticus stood firm, raising his wand with a deft motion to disperse the attack once more. The black sandstorm seemed inexhaustible. Each time it was scattered, it reformed, slightly larger, and charged at Atticus again, only to be obliterated in a flash of silver-green light. "Kill Blaine!" The wizard, who had cleverly escaped the base earlier, returned to the hall, shouting with fervor. "Blaine has sealed the base with fierce fire. The German Ministry of Magic is outside. We can only escape if we kill him." The crowd erupted in chaos. The base wizards, who had been mere spectators of the duel moments ago, hesitated no longer. They rallied, forming a circle around Atticus and Louise. With hundreds of wands aimed at him, even Atticus dared not be complacent. The vortex in his pupils began to spin once more, the purple in his eyes vanishing as tiny bolts of lightning flickered across them. "Close your eyes," Atticus murmured softly. "What?" Louise asked, startled. Before she could receive an answer, the battle commenced. The brilliance that erupted before her eyes made Louise feel as though she had been plunged into the sun. The light, imbued with magic that shook the very fabric of space, obscured her vision and elicited a scream of pain. The events that had transpired by the lakeside replayed themselves. The light of the curses vanished at a certain distance from Atticus, as if the magic had been dismantled and returned to nature. But unlike before, Atticus did not wait passively for the assault to end. He raised his wand with force, causing the ground to tremble violently. Sharp thorns erupted from the earth, spreading rapidly. In an instant, dozens of wizards were impaled, their bodies hanging limply from the spikes. This swift and ruthless counterattack did not deter the remaining wizards. Instead, it fueled their fury. Those with exceptional magical prowess waved their wands, employing various methods to lift themselves off the ground and evade the deadly spikes. The air was filled with the lethal incantations of the Killing Curse, Cruciatus Curse, Corruption Curse, and Fire. The dangerous, brilliant flames continued to strike the invisible barrier surrounding Atticus. Atticus Blaine stood amidst the chaos, the rumbling sound around him reminiscent of a summer thunderstorm. Under the relentless assault, the once impenetrable invisible barrier surrounding him began to falter, the clear space compressing inch by inch. This sudden onslaught forced Atticus to become completely serious. With a determined flick of his wand, layers of defensive magic materialized, one after another, encircling both him and Louise. In the outermost space, 8 twisted silver-blue vortices appeared, slowly spinning to absorb the incoming spells and fortify themselves. Beyond the vortices, several large platinum shields shimmered into existence, their surfaces gleaming as they met the barrage of attacks with a series of heavy resonant thuds. Atticus gently moved Luis's hand aside and brandished his wand with purpose. A golden fire python, as formidable as an fly serpent, emerged with a roar that echoed like thunder, its tail coiled protectively around Atticus, who stood with a cold and stern demeanor. The python's cavernous mouth opened wide, unleashing torrents of fire in all directions. The malevolent creatures summoned by the wizards guarding the base were consumed by the golden flames, collapsing into green embers. Yet, the giant python did not exhibit a purely destructive nature. Countless cursed lights struck the fire python, causing it to ripple violently and roar repeatedly in defiance. End of this chapter. Chapter 799. Judgment Time. There was no final magic. The two sides engaged in fierce combat were locked in a primitive struggle. Atticus Blaine's eyes had returned to their original brown hue, exuding a sharp, malevolent aura like a finely honed blade. He wielded his wand with relentless precision, shaping the form of a fire python and commanding it to decimate the resisting wizards in the hall. If the outside world witnessed this massacre, Atticus Blaine's name might eclipse Voldemort's before he could even succeed Dumbledore. This was a holy war. Devotees loyal to the gods were prepared to sacrifice their lives for their beliefs, seeking transcendence in the golden flames. Conversely, those pseudo-defenders who used faith as a guise for their malevolent desires began to retreat when their lives were in grave danger. As the battle raged on, the hall transformed into a scene of purgatory, with white bones rising and falling in the flowing magma. The golden sun that had once appeared at the Quidditch World Cup re-emerged. Atticus Blaine stood within a golden fireball formed by magma, slowly ascending into the air, supported by a surge of magical power. He gazed indifferently at the surviving wizards below. Flashes of fire continuously erupted from the surface of the golden blazing sun where Atticus resided. He raised his wand, and the restless fire swiftly gathered above it, eventually forming a flaming sword with a dazzling golden handle. Like a deity about to deliver divine retribution, Atticus's voice, vast and indifferent, echoed through the inferno, while his towering presence exerted a palpable pressure. "I will say this only once," Atticus declared, looking down at the crowd. "Surrender your wands and be captured, or we will all perish here." As they looked up at the indistinct figure bathed in infinite light and shadow, witnessing the hundreds of attacks that left him unscathed, and feeling the searing heat and murderous intent close to their skin, the resistors' fierce expressions gradually softened into resignation. A wand clattered to the ground. "We can't defeat him," someone uttered in despair. "This is the new god," another murmured, falling to their knees with tears streaming down their face. One by one, wands fell to the ground. Gradually, the rumbling in the hall and the sporadic flashes of curse light ceased, leaving only the golden sun slowly descending to the ground. Awe, fear, and reverence filled the air. Atticus landed with a soft click. He surveyed the room, bathed in adoring gazes, his expression serene. Yet, a wave of emotion stirred within him. The allure of becoming a god was undeniable. However, this temptation lingered only briefly in Atticus's heart before reason prevailed. With a decisive motion, Atticus dropped his wand again. The abandoned wands on the ground emitted sharp sounds as they pierced the air, embedding themselves in a circle around Louise's feet. The wand tips released ropes imbued with an anti-apparition spell, binding the surviving wizards tightly. "Please forgive me, Mr. Blaine." Someone finally broke down, collapsing to the ground in tears. "I have children." This plea seemed to ignite a wave of self-reflection. People began confessing their innocence to Atticus, hoping for divine forgiveness. "You will receive a fair trial," Atticus began, and the once noisy hall fell silent. "If you are willing to confess your crimes, the International Federation of Wizards and the Ministry, the magical authorities of various countries, will consider mitigating your sentences as appropriate." A group of people, having lost their will to resist, couldn't wait to confess. They longed to approach Atticus Blaine and confess immediately, but they dared not do so without permission. Louise stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. She looked at Atticus's straight back, opened her mouth, but found herself at a loss for words. It was all coming to an end. Atticus turned to look at Louise, his expression softening. He waved to her, and her body floated gently, softly in the hall. She stared blankly at her feet, lying next to a pile of solidified lava that still emitted a blazing light. Nearby, a severely burned man began to regain some color in his eyes. It was Angus Aeschylus. Surprisingly, in the recent chaos, this obscurus, who had been thought destroyed, was still alive, though barely. Obscuruses possess great power but fragile lives. Though his hair was singed and half his face severely burned, he clung to consciousness, holding on by a thread. He looked at Atticus Blaine, who was gradually approaching, and let out a hoarse, mocking laugh, a look of resignation in his eyes. Seeing the fading life in Aeschylus, a touch of pity appeared in Atticus's brown eyes. Aeschylus was not the mastermind behind Hermione's incident, but he bore his own sins. "Did you kill Fraser Ondare?" Atticus asked. Aeschylus's eyes showed confusion, as if he had forgotten the name. "The inferi you left behind in Cokeworth," Atticus said calmly. With difficulty, Aeschylus opened his mouth, his voice a tearing rasp. "What did you do for that muggle?" he asked. "This is the man who killed your brother Louise." With a flick, a 3-foot-long thorn emerged from the tip of Atticus's wand. He handed the wand to Louise. "He is the reason you became involved in the magical world. Kill him, and your revenge will be complete." Louise looked at the fiery thorn in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "This is Fraser Ondare's sister, Louise Ondare. Thanks to her help, I found you so quickly," Atticus explained to Aeschylus, who was staring at Louise. "She asked me to help her find her brother's killer." Aeschylus laughed, a sound both humorous and tragic. "You, Blaine, would you destroy us for a muggle?" he asked. "Any questions?" Atticus's murderous aura had vanished, and he now seemed more like a professor discussing magic with his students. "Very, very good," Aeschylus gasped, closing his eyes as if recalling something from the past. A single tear fell from the corner of his eye. "You're good for it, Blaine," he said in a relieved tone. "Kill me, Louise Ondare, to avenge your brother." "No!" Louise suddenly exclaimed. She stepped back, the fiery thorn slipping from her hand and embedding itself in the ground. "No, I don't have this right." Facing Atticus's questioning gaze, Louise's face turned pale. Her dry lips moved as she shook her head slightly, repeating in a panicked whisper, "No, I don't have this right." "He would have been sentenced to death anyway," Atticus said, smiling at Louise's refusal. "If you don't kill him, you'll never experience the satisfaction of revenge. Are you sure you want to give up, Louise?" "I cannot." Louise's voice was firm. She took a deep breath and met Atticus's eyes with her own clear gaze. "Now that I've found him, let the wizard's law judge him." End of this chapter. Chapter 800, Nurmengard, "Stupid muggle," muttered Aeschylus, lying on the ground with his eyes closed, resigned to his fate. "If you insist on doing this." Atticus Blaine smiled gently, his fingers curling as his wand flew back into his hand. Turning to the assembled wizards, he announced, "The next step is to handle the aftermath." As they prepared to return to the UK, a wave of sadness washed over Louise, leaving her feeling unexpectedly melancholic. It was truly time to conclude this chapter. Fraser's murderer had been apprehended, and the organization behind him dismantled by Atticus with decisive force. Imprisonment awaited them all. Everything seemed to be in order. "Wait," Louise suddenly exclaimed, blinking rapidly. "The mastermind behind this conspiracy, your student who was cursed, have you discovered their motive?" "Perhaps," Atticus replied ambiguously. "It likely ties back to Adam Vogel. I must see him." "Do you know where he is?" Louise pressed. "Perhaps," Atticus repeated, offering no further clarity. Before Louise could question him further, he added, "Let's head up. The German Ministry of Magic is probably in a frenzy by now." Atticus's words were an understatement. The entire German Ministry of Magic was in a state of hysteria. On the road from Berlin to Oranienburg, police cars and fire trucks stretched for a mile, their piercing sirens shattering the tranquility of the deep night. A massive golden fire net still enveloped the area, with magic relentlessly assaulting it. Yet, the cursed lights seemed feeble against the formidable blaze. Boom! A loud explosion interrupted the Minister of Magic's tirade. A breathless messenger reported, "Minister, Director Jaeger has halted the Muggle rescue team. Director Kennard is in urgent talks with the Muggle president. We should have a resolution soon." What about the barrier? The burly Minister of Magic bellowed. How long will this damn enchantment last? How long will we be exposed to Muggle eyes? Just 10 more minutes, Mr. Minister, another employee shouted, panting as he emerged from the dense forest. Mr. Bayer says he needs 10 more minutes to establish the protective barrier. These responses seemed satisfactory. The German Minister of Magic, Nicholas Adenauer, who had been scowling as if he were staring into a cauldron of despair, relaxed slightly. However, his expression darkened again when he noticed the group of reporters on the other side, their cameras nearly sparking from excitement. I want Cornelius Fudge to give me an explanation. Adenauer roared at Kingsley, who could only offer a bitter smile. I swear I'll send Atticus Blaine to prison. Azkaban, Costa, New, wherever. I want him locked away for life. He nearly exposed the wizarding world here in Germany. I think he should be hanged, the irate German minister shouted. I don't care about his great reputation. The surrounding employees of the German Ministry of Magic fell silent. They knew their minister could neither imprison Atticus Blaine nor execute him. If what Kingsley Shacklebolt had said was true, determining who should bear the responsibility was indeed a complex matter. The ground's tremors interrupted Niklaus Adenauer's curses. Those outside the fire net stared in astonishment as wisps of hot white smoke rose from the damp earth. It seemed as if a furnace beneath the ground was scorching the soil, and the surging magic below made many reconsider their positions. The battle down there must be intense, perhaps even more so than last year's Quidditch World Cup, someone whispered, eyes wide with awe, showing fascination, but after being glared at by Adenauer, he smiled coquettishly and said nothing. Kingsley pursed his lips and looked at the strangeness of the earth, his heart filled with anxiety. The man just said was right. Mr. Blaine must have encountered fierce resistance below. The fire net disappeared unexpectedly. Suddenly, the scorching heat that burned them disappeared. A breeze came, and everything was like a dream. When Atticus and Louise appeared in front of Kingsley, many wands were pointed at them, causing Atticus to put down his wand. I think. Atticus raised his brows and looked at the strong wizard who was glaring at him with a majestic face. You must be Niklaus Adenauer, Minister of the German Ministry of Magic. Atticus acted as if nothing had happened with a slight smile on his face and extended his hand towards the furious German Minister of Magic. Stop it, Blaine! Adenauer gritted his teeth, wishing he could devour Atticus alive, but looking at Atticus Blaine with a smile on his face, he was momentarily at a loss for words. You, Blaine, explain. I want an explanation, Blaine. Why did you do this? Finally, Minister Adenauer suppressed his voice. How? Atticus looked at Kingsley. He noticed that Kingsley's hands were tied behind his back, and he was still being detained. A faint displeasure appeared on his face. Didn't Kingsley explain to you that we are tracking down a group of extremely vicious thugs whose crimes are countless? Because of the special circumstances, I had to overlook certain legalities. This is just your one-sided statement, Blaine. Adenauer was now breathless too. There is no substantial evidence to prove their existence. My people only saw how brazenly you fought against others in a Muggle-populated university, releasing fiendfire, and what happened here. Everyone in Berlin saw it. You need evidence? With a smile on his face, Atticus turned to the lonely watchtower and said softly, So, they're here. Before Adenauer could ask questions, a door with silver light suddenly appeared on the gray wall of the dim fortress. Under the eyes of many people in shock, Yasna Rosier, who was bound in the fire prison, appeared. However, this was not the end, just the beginning. Wizards with somber expressions, tied by ropes, lined up in a long line on the desolate grassland, as if a concentration camp that had been dormant for half a century had come to life again. Where did they come from? So many wizards. We didn't register them. No one paid attention to the absent-minded murmurs of the Ministry of Magic employees responsible for this work. The reporters were completely silent for a few seconds before erupting into a frenzy. They ran towards the criminals, heedless of the danger, snapping photos from all angles. This is the proof you wanted, Minister Adenauer, Atticus smiled and said. Of course, this evidence may not be sufficient, but if you send your people to the underground base to investigate, you will know what these people have done on your territory. Atticus emphasized, your territory, which he believed Niklaus Adenauer would understand. As expected, Adenauer's expression changed slightly, and he pursed his lips to say something. However, Atticus spoke again, in a voice only the two of them could hear. Whether the German Ministry of Magic wants to bear the blame for oversight, or be the hero who cracked down on the dark wizard organization that harmed Muggles, make a choice, Minister Adenauer. After that, Niklaus Adenauer fell completely silent. Mr. Blaine. Many astute reporters flocked to Atticus. These reporters, who had caught the big news, couldn't contain their excitement. Louise curled her lips. As a colleague, she knew very well how thrilled they were. Can you explain to us what happened tonight, Mr. Blaine? Who are these people? Who are these people, and what have they done? Similar questions echoed around the room, forcing Atticus Blaine to raise his voice. I am eager to have an open conversation with you all, but unfortunately, now is not the time. I must leave immediately. The crime has not been fully eradicated, and I am on my way to bring the mastermind behind it to justice. You can't leave, Blaine, Adenauer exclaimed, suddenly alert and frowning. You need to inform the people. Atticus met Adenauer's gaze with calm yet resolute eyes, prompting Adenauer to take a deep breath. Where exactly are you going, Mr. Blaine? He asked. Kingsley, standing nearby, felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He understood the chaos that would erupt across the European wizarding world by morning. If Atticus, the focal point of public attention, was absent, managing the aftermath would be a daunting task for those left behind. With his back to the flashing cameras, Atticus paused for a moment, contemplating his next words. Finally, he spoke softly. Nurmengard. End of this chapter.